Yeah, okay, great, thank you. That's great.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I am calling our town council business meeting to order. Today is Thursday, November 6th. We have our Reverend Deborah Gray in her clergy apparel, so I'm going to have her do a quick prayer before our meeting.
Everybody can sit. In the Methodist tradition, we sit to receive blessings. Father, we thank you for your presence in our lives. We thank you, God, for this wonderful town that you have given us called Southern Pines. We pray, God, that as we handle the business of this meeting tonight, that you will keep our hearts and our minds clear on the good of this town. We give you praise for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you. If you'll all please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will move on to our town manager's comments. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mayor Clement. Your agenda is pretty straightforward this evening. After the adoption of the agenda, you'll have a proclamation that I know you wish to address. And then we've got a consent agenda that simply includes some minutes. 3 public hearings this evening, 2 of which, in all likelihood, will again be continuations, and the planning staff will address those first 2 items when that comes up. And then under your action items, there is an offer of dedication for a portion of South Carlisle Street. If you're kind of wondering where that is or looked at the map and wondered, if you take the Brucewood extension off of Morganton, head straight back toward Legends Apartments, it would be the newer section of Carlisle to the left that runs over to Tanglewood Drive. So the most recently installed piece of Carlisle back there. And then there will be a request for a closed session to perform performance evaluations for both my office and the town attorney. Just for those who happen to be viewing the live stream will end when the council votes to move into closed session. The council may choose to take action once they return to open session following those discussions in closed session. And with that, I'll certainly take any questions or turn it back over to you for adoption of the agenda.
Thank you, Manager Parsons. Are there any questions?
There's a question. Many people have approached me in the last few days asking about the fact that on the live stream, again, they can't see the slides, and I'm hoping that that's going to rectify at our new location.
Yeah, I know IT staff has been working with our town clerk on that, and we are looking at options once we move into that new facility and get the new meetings chambers set up to try and be able to do something with that, yes.
So I can tell them that January or February we'll hopefully have that happening?
On when
That
we
will
move
depend a
in.
lot on when we get closed, moved into the building, and the construction for it is over. I will say it is not likely to be January. I'd love to believe February.
Okay, thank you.
Might want to hedge your bets and say March. We'll just see what happens.
I'm going with February. I'm going to have high expectations. Thanks. All right, appreciate it.
Only doing consent.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I asked staff to do a proclamation for Veterans Day. I have it here, and it is signed, if you guys would like to see it, and I will present it. Minutes? It's on the consent. We haven't gotten there yet. If you all have any questions or would like to read it, I will present it to Rick and Susan Herrera on Saturday morning at our Veterans Parade. If you all would like to see it, I'll just pass it around. Just expressing our appreciation for our veterans in our community and their hosting of the Veterans Parade in Southern Pines. I know they've expanded it this year and have asked, I believe, all the mayors in Moore County. And I don't know if they've mentioned, I think they did say council as well, but I think the mayors will be leading the meeting. So it could be, the parade. So it will be a bigger group this year. Hopefully anyone in the audience or anyone who's listening will attend. It's got to be our best parade of the year.
10 o'clock this Saturday.
All right, moving on to public comments. I have 3 people signed up. Just to confirm, the 3 people who I have your names, Joel, Chris, and Ken, are any of you speaking specifically on the Phoenix Village application? Phoenix Village is going to wait, and then we're just going to do general right now. So I just wanted to confirm that these 3 people are general comments. Okay. What I'll do is I'll leave this with Beth, and you can sign up when you come and speak. Okay, so assuming that these are general comments, we'll start with Joel. Joel, is your last name Carner? Carner. Okay, I think in my mind it was always Garner. I
have lots of awards that say Garner.
Okay, well, I now know it's
Carter,
Carner.
And yes, I've got them all. So Joel Carner, 465 East Delaware, just real quick before we begin with the real action, I wanted to present this. I drive past here every day, and I just wanted to say thank you. This is absolutely gorgeous. The other thing that I wanted to say is these sweatshirts are now available, as well as T-shirts at the Welcome Center. They are beautiful and lovely design. You'll notice that our illustrious leader of the Welcome Center has one as herself. And that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Carner. All right, Mr. Smithson. Just a reminder, these are 3-minute comments. We have our town clerk keeping an eye on time. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's fine. Okay.
Chris Smithson, 570 South May Street. Served on town council 2003 to 2013. Have a lot of institutional memory. I want to talk a little bit about downtown to start with. Before I got on council, when Mr. McInerney was on there, council passed an ordinance to allow signs out in front of the stores downtown, like little sandwich board signs. And it all seemed like a good idea, although for the last 20 plus years, we've had a kayak that's somehow a sign, but to segue more into the street furniture, which was something that we passed while I was on the council. Again, seems like a good idea. You know, thriving downtowns, urban areas often have outdoor dining, seating and things like that. Going through the ordinance as it exists now, I don't think it's changed a whole lot. Site plans are required and for approval and all that. And I think most importantly in that ordinance, supposed to be 5 feet of clearance so the pedestrians can walk down the sidewalk. Certainly on the east side of Broad Street, that is nowhere close. I mean, shoulder width, 3 feet or whatever in some places in front of, and I'm not gonna point to anybody in specifically, but I live downtown and I walk downtown like in the morning before it's even open. And sometimes it's hard to get by because you've got planters and tables and all these things in the sidewalk. They're not in compliance with the ordinance. We have other areas that have taken over huge parts of the right of way. I don't know how that all came, but I would like to remind you and the town and the staff that enforces our ordinances that sidewalks are for like walking or being in a stroller or something and not for putting a potted plant out in the middle of the sidewalk or a sign or whatever. So thank you on that. Also, I saw a thing on the pilot today about the town waiving cutoffs or on utilities, and I've written to the council before about how Southern Pines is like the most vicious utility as far as cutting people off from late payment. Unless something has changed recently, if you're just the previous month plus 2 weeks, not even until the next billing cycle, you will get cut off. And there's nothing more important than water. We can live without power for a few days. We've done that when people shot up the transformers. You can live without certain things, but if you can't flush your toilet, and the town will cut you off like crazy. So again, I ask you to get in line with every other utility that we deal with and be a little bit more reasonable with your billing cycles and certainly the cutoffs, and notice about cutoffs. Upgrade your, you know, if I forget my Duke Power bill, I get a text, hey, your Duke Power bill's late. You get nothing from the town except turning on the water and your water's off. And obviously it's your fault if you don't pay, but the town is just way unreasonable compared to any other utility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smithson. And Ken McDonald.
Good evening, council. I'm Ken McDonald. I live at 749 South Ridge Street. My wife and I and our children and our grandchildren have been enjoying the quality of life in this wonderful place for 10 years. And I acknowledge the characteristics that make this such a wonderful town are largely because of the work of this council, both you and your predecessors. But I've noticed something that in recent years has increasingly crept into life here, and it's tainting the vision we all have for a tranquil town, the gas leaf blower. They have become so popular, particularly with landscapers, that I promise you, if you walk outside during daylight hours, you will hear one, most days, year-round. You often can't sit on your patio, and nearly every single day year-round, if you walk around town, as I like to do, you'll encounter them loud and obnoxious from 2 to 3 blocks away. You can't even walk in the woods of Weymouth in peace and quiet. There are solutions beyond the humble rake, quiet battery-powered ones selected with noise in mind instead of just wind speed, have improved so much over the years that even contractors could use them just by switching out batteries during the day. Perhaps council would be willing to revisit the noise ordinance and phase in alternatives over a few years, or find other measures that will make it possible to again enjoy the outdoors in our lovely town.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. All right, I saw a couple hands. If you'd like to come up and speak.
Any other colors?
Good evening, Suzanne Coleman, 225 North May. It's nice to be here. It's nice to see everybody. It's been a while. I came to thank you for your continued support for the Welcome Center. November 9th is our 20th anniversary of being in the train station. It's hard to believe. And we have enjoyed unparalleled support from the town staff and from the town council, from all the town councils. In honor of the anniversary, we reached out to Hannah Roser, who's an incredibly talented illustrator, to create this new graphic because so many visitors had said, don't you have a T-shirt or a hoodie that has the train station on it? Because we had pine trees, and everybody has pine trees. So this is hot off the presses. We have them in 5 colors and 5 sizes. They're $35, and we hope that we would give you one, but we're not allowed to, right, Mac? We can't give them something at $35. Yeah. You'll take a look? Okay, we gave him a hat when he first got hired. He did pay for it. We tried to give it to him, but he did pay for it. So thank you all, and thank you for all you're doing. And I think it's a fabulous idea that you are buying the First Bank building. I just think it makes so much sense. I'm so pleased for you. I think it will just improve efficiency, and we're really looking forward to you being in that building. So thank you very much, and happy Thanksgiving.
What was the date, Ms. Coleman? What's the date of your all's 20th anniversary?
November 9th,
Thank you, ma'am.
Sunday.
All right.
They're going to have a parade for us on November 8th.
It's outside. We've got the
There is,
parachuters coming in. All right, thank you. All right, is there anyone else with a general public comment? Okay, and just as a reminder, we will have comments about PNIC when we get to that agenda item. All right, moving on to our consent agenda. Are there any questions? I think you said you had one.
I do, for Beth. Beth, on page 12, the minutes from October 28th, at the bottom, just above adjournment, it reads, "This is especially important with Reverend Gray here in her outfit." It says, "Councilman Goodman thanked staff for addressing concerns by installing a SIN." I think it was a sign.
Okay. Good correction.
All right.
Now, no longer.
Just wonder how that would be judged in years.
All right, are there other questions on minutes? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve them?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to our public hearings. I think we have town staff addressing both landscaping and tree protection amendment to our UDO, as well as character district amendment to the zoning map and UDO.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of council, good evening. My name is BJ Grieve. I'm with the Flathead, with the,
Jeez.
about,
Some habits are hard
wow,
to
that
break.
was more than 8 years ago. Holy cow. Town of Southern Pines Planning Department. I've done that in a long time. And I'm here to briefly address the circumstances with file number OA0324 as well as Z0424 and OA0424. What are those file numbers? Okay. If you go all the way back to phase 1 of comp plan implementation, in December of 2023, we adopted a new comprehensive plan. Phase 1 included projects such as revising and updating our landscaping code to, in summary, focus a little bit more on quality rather than quantity. Number one. Number two was to look at a way that the town of Southern Pines could pass a tree protection ordinance and sort of thread the needle on a lot of different constraints to doing tree protection in the state of North Carolina. We spent a good year working on those. We brought them to you. They came before you in November of 2024. It was continued 1 month. And in the meantime, the state of North Carolina passed Senate Bill 382, which made it illegal to downzone. And downzone was, the definition of downzoning was changed to include creation of any nonconformities. What that meant was that since the landscaping code, the tree protection ordinance possibly, as well as the second one on the agenda, character districts, character districts was to one of our main implementation tactics where everybody said, we don't love necessarily a lot of change and growth, but we know it's going to happen, so let's keep Southern Pines Southern Pinesy by adopting districts where design elements that make Southern Pines Southern Pinesy are found in new development. So all those things, because they do have the potential to create nonconformities in adopting these amendments, they all got put on hold. And so as you will recall, they've been continued multiple times. We're going on, they have been continued 5 times at this point. And now Senate Bill 587 is the only one left pending in the current legislative session that may affect the definition of downzoning to remove the provision that creates that forbids creating nonconformities. If that passes in November or December, that may change the circumstances. If it does not and the session ends, we're going to be starting over. So that's all context for everybody in the room, and went really fast, to say that staff now recommends that this be continued possibly one last time to the February 10th, 2026 regular meeting to give time to see what happens, and then by the end of the year to refresh this file, because at this point I got a call about it this week and I said, holy cow, clear my schedule. I need to go back and refresh on the minutia of all these files because it's been a minute. So we'll take that little extra time to make sure we freshen it up and bring it back here. And also do a bang-up presentation on it again, just to refresh everybody's memory.
And can you do a less fast rendition of why this impacts the proposed tree ordinance? This has been something I've wondered on downzoning. Why is a tree ordinance included in downzoning? Or can you or Mac either one speak to that?
Great question. Understandable. We're not 100% sure whether the tree protection ordinance creates a process whereby
Right.
new development has to potentially preserve new trees. The potential for it to create a nonconformity is that old projects presently would, just like any other nonconformity, once you adopt a new requirement, previous development that didn't have it doesn't have to change.
Right. It's grandfathered in.
It is now non-conforming. Grandfathered is non-conforming. Those two are pretty much synonymous in the zoning world.
Okay.
So you've just created a non-conformity, and that's, to planners, that's a little bit of the frustration about calling a non-conformity, including non-conformity, as also downzoning, because actually they're a little bit different. In fact, deeming something non-conforming so that it can stay there and it's grandfathered, it doesn't have to comply with the new rule, used to be the pressure valve to make sure that when you adopted a new rule, people with something the old way weren't affected. But now what the law says is that you can't adopt any law that's new moving forward that creates that nonconformity in the past. Well, that pretty much stops an awful lot of things, including small sections of the tree protection ordinance. But we have not gone back and teased all those out because the original plan was wait and see what happens. Because as soon as Senate Bill 382 was passed, almost immediately there was talk about in the next session going back because there was a lot of lack of clarity. I don't want to get too far into it because of course it's politics and whatnot, but there was a lot of discussion about, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that strange nuance of how nonconformity got inserted in the definition of downzoning, and those two are unrelated. But come to find out over the last year, it just hasn't risen to the top of a legislation priority. In fact, only Mill River, North Carolina has gotten it changed for them. So that's a long answer to your question, which is
That was better. I went with you for part of that. Thank you. And
Yeah.
I'm going to see you in your office really soon, and we're going to make it crystal clear for me. My other question is, what's the repercussion of going ahead and improving the tree ordinance? I mean, what's the worst possible scenario if we approved it? Who's going to come after us? And that's maybe a Matt question.
in that one, I may prefer to defer to Mac if you're willing.
I think Mac has answered the same question about a year ago.
Right.
The ordinance first. Will it create nonconformities?
Yes.
There are portions of it that may.
Maybe.
I'm going to say, because there are portions of it that may, I'm going to say yes.
Okay. If the answer is yes, then you would be passing something that all of us know would be in violation of the law. And if we tried to enforce it, we'd be creating plaintiffs.
Thank you. Thank you both. Please.
Of all the three, I think the tree protection ordinance could probably be modified
I do too.
bits and pieces to make it so that it doesn't create nonconformities. I think there's only a few pieces that do. The issue has been that thus far, the path of least resistance was waiting because each 3 months, the best summary of what's going on in Raleigh is that give it just a little bit more time, and I think Senate Bill 587, for example, is going to fix 382, so the best path was to wait. We may get to February, and the best path may be, let's tinker with tree protection, and even if we have to 86 the other two.
So do we think that if 586 passes, do we think we should strike while the iron is hot, perhaps? Or do you think there's a chance, I think there's definitely a chance that then 586 would be derailed again or overturned?
May I answer that?
Yes, please.
Complete repeal. It simply would change the statute some and
Right.
give us some relief on pieces of it.
Right.
And even if it passes, we'll probably have to retool the proposals.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's where in February, if that's the case, once we know what's going to happen by the end of this session, what the language winds up being, we can go in and we can come back. We're still under the same public hearing. And so we would be able to talk about, hey, it looks like we need to change the following things. And so that would be, because when we did notice, you'll remember for this hearing, we actually notified, for the character districts, we notified everybody that lived in that character district. It was a big notification. And that's why we're reluctant to just withdraw it and start over because of that notification. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Are there,
So our recommendation is continuance at this point on both those files to February 10th, 2026.
or motion?
I will move to continue agenda items 6A and 6B to the February 10th, 2026 regular business meeting.
All those in favor, vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Director Grieve. All right, moving on to our Phoenix Village Conceptual Development Plan, file PD-04-25. Mr. Maddox? And just for some background, this was something that we had discussed in August, continued 60 days, but then their land changed. They had more land, so then they went back through the planning board, and now we're seeing it as a completely different application. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to preface this with
Oh,
that story anyway.
I will let you- I'll let you tell
You're one
it.
step ahead of me, which is
Okay.
lovely. Mason Maddox, Planner 2 with the town. I think I know many of your faces now, neighbors and Phoenix representatives as well. I know it has been through a few meetings, so thank you all for entrusting me to be the planner responsible for this. It means a lot, it does. It's a big project. Yes, as the mayor was saying, PNIC originally is doing this because there's a provision unique to our UDO which requires an expansion of land to go through and become a planned development district. But more on the actual story, and I tried to illustrate this as best as I could right here. As the mayor said, in September, PNIC Village acquired another parcel of land. That restarts the whole process. Council had originally continued the project from August to October, went to October Planning Board, so just last month, and now here we are tonight for potentially the final hearing of this. That is the parcel that has been added. You can see it on screen right in purple. Our UDO explicitly says that that restarts the public hearing process, the addition of land to a proposed or approved conceptual development plan. Little issue of watershed we'll get into in a moment. Existing zoning of PNIC Village, both existing and proposed, is RM1 and FRR. We have a refreshed, nice and updated plan here. I will note a little bit more about the setbacks on screen right, and I'll let our applicant's technical representative speak to those a little bit more as something that came out of the last several meetings, both planning board and council. 3 proposed access points at PNIC Village, ultimately changing Shibui Avenue to go all the way through, so there's nice, easy access from Delaware Avenue. You can see here, I'll note the existing unit count, that's units/beds, and the proposed unit count as 474 when this is all said and done as their maximum new capacity. And then I went through and made the list on the right to look at all of the proposed land uses that would be involved in this conceptual development plan and this PD. I did not find any of these to be inconsistent with what they're doing or proposing to do. Everything consistent with a continuing care retirement facility, that is. All right, we're looking at 2 sets of criteria here, rezoning and then conceptual development plan criteria. I'll go through those real quick because nothing new to many here. There is a bit of an oddity that I addressed last time, but new application technically, going to bring it up again. PNIC Village is under the character district of horse country, and I don't think that the PNIC residents would appreciate being compared to horse country. Y'all aren't horses. We got to fix that. And so that's why part of this application for planning's perspective is a concurrent map amendment to our comprehensive plan. That will be the first time we've done that to our comprehensive plan since it was adopted in 2023. So that was one inconsistency that planning identified, more of a cleanup than anything else, not really a concern. All right, adverse impacts to neighboring lands. I use this as an opportunity to address some of the original concerns that came before council back in August, mostly from adjacent property owners, including but not limited to building height, parking for employees and construction traffic as 2 separate issues, but both needing addressing. Stormwater was, I would say, a larger issue back in August when some of the systems weren't fully up and running to town standards that are currently now. We can discuss a little bit more. Also, many of those issues were following Tropical Storm Chantal in August, a lot of rain, and in a little bit more of a dry season, so I'll note that PNIC has to rezone to expand their capacity, as mentioned earlier. That was the suitability as presently zoned category. Health, safety, and welfare. The comprehensive plan spells out a need for infill development, loud and clear. This is developing a little bit more land adjacent to something that's existing. It seems very logical from an urban planning perspective, instead of building something maybe farther away. There are several policies in the comprehensive plan which support this rezoning, being an active community, housing diversity, aging in place is also in the comprehensive plan to support the town's ability to serve and care for those as people age in our community. Size of tract, I've refreshed these numbers a couple times. Sorry for that, Bob. I keep adding up the total acreage on GIS, which is slightly different sometimes from more counties, but we're talking minor decimal points, but about 36 acres for the existing campus and about somewhere between 7 and 9 for Shibui Gardens area, that orange area you see on screen right. And then I had at the bottom the math that I did. So a 20% increase in land thereabouts with about a 76-77% increase in capacity. That was something that I know came out of council in August. I chose not to treat this as a completely new application. I thought it would be unwise to sort of begin from scratch. So I did try to incorporate some of planning's, some of council's original concerns when even doing this report.
Thank you.
So Yep. No issues with red cockaded woodpeckers. Planning feels that that's been resolved by a letter from Jay Carter and Associates, and even this layer isn't the most accurate. Our GIS can be a little squirrely at some times, but not a concern from planning. I'll let the applicant speak a little bit more. The applicant's technical representative to the phasing plan, very colorful, very helpful. Next set of criteria is conceptual development plan criteria, also very brief because many of which overlap with rezoning, so discuss that there. Comprehensive plan consistency, again, more of a cleanup than an actual issue according to planning's perspective. I will let the applicant cover these some more because I know that's in the presentation that's upcoming. There are several deviations from the UDO that is requested as a part of this conceptual development plan. That is the purpose of a conceptual development plan, to outline any zoning that might not default to the UDO. I'll table height until the very end of my discussion, but there's a request for open space requirements to be lowered. Planning supports that because of the existing campus nature. Phoenix isn't unsimilar to a university campus in the regard of how buildings are situated, maybe around a lot of common green space and paths, I would say. So very reasonable. Then there's some architectural standards with garages facing a certain direction, basically not Ridge Street or Delaware Avenue, and then a change to building material because these buildings, any new buildings at Phoenix would be multifamily and therefore would have to follow the town's commercial building code, which states that each facade has to be at least 80% masonry pursuant to our UDO. 80% does not match what is currently existing on Phoenix Village. Finally, the big one for council to look at is the last deviation, which is that buildings in excess of 10,000 square feet could be administratively approved if they comply with all of the standards of both the UDO and the CDP by town staff. Bit of a unique one there. Staff didn't have an issue with that, just admired its creativity. It's a unique ask. Appropriateness for location, Phoenix been in its current spot since 1964. Many residents have been here for a while too, note that. Public infrastructure and efficiency, no issues identified on behalf of the town. Spoke with the town engineer and others about this. Phoenix understands that water and sewer, the cost of upgrading will be theirs as needed and determined by the town engineer. But it is adjacent to our downtown, and so those facilities do exist. No issues there. Pending discussion. All right. Take a deep breath, moment we're waiting for in all of this. There were three things I want to turn your attention to specifically. The first is watershed allocation, which can be a bit of a tricky thing on its own. There is no application at this moment for watershed allocation. The applicant and the applicant's technical representative wanted to wait and understand those numbers a little bit better on if they should allocate watershed now or later, or perhaps try to calculate the existing portion of Shibui Gardens area, the Shibui Avenue area, and use that number instead. None of these are invalid options. We've seen as planning all of these done at some point. And so I noted that in a condition of approval, if this is to be approved tonight, which states that they will have to revise the conceptual development plan narrative to state that watershed must be addressed prior to submitting a PDP application. So that's phase 2 of 3 for everyone unfamiliar. This is part 1 of 3. And the third and final part would be the site plan review, which is done by town staff. So if this is approved, the next phase that you all see is the preliminary development plan. That's when they would come in for individual pieces or maybe building sections. And that has to go through the public process just like this. The second issue is building height. I want to note that the planning board actually did discuss this and did not deliver any issues to that to you. So a bit of a curiosity that I'm still bringing it up, only because I know that it is a concern to many adjacent property owners here tonight. So while the planning board chose not to speak more on building height, there were discussions, as noted in my report, on buildings specifically adjacent to, here, I'll go back and pull this up so you can see. I think that's a good one. Delaware Avenue and Ridge Street. So really the perimeter that faces existing residential areas. A little bit of debate over how high those should be permissible to be. 3 stories or 4 stories seem to be the thing. And I'll let our applicant's technical representative discuss that a little bit more and the proposed new setbacks and how those were addressed. So the third and final issue I'd like to point out is the planning board's recommendation to consider a trail adjacent to Ridge Street. The trail ideas seem to be supported heavily by adjacent property owners, the neighbors, as well as Peanut Village and their technical representatives themselves, something to allow people to get basically from Delaware Avenue, if you're looking on Plan North, all the way over to Main Avenue to access the Weymouth areas without having to go, through Phoenix. So I'll let them speak to that a little bit more. So that's what's pending. Any questions for staff before I turn this over? I know there's more discussion to come.
Thank you, Mr. Maddox. Other questions?
Will you take me back to the slide on percentages, please? I think I understand it's about a 20% increase in land acquisition and a 77% increase in occupancy. Is that right?
Thereabout. That is correct. According to my very basic calculations, I know that that was an issue that was brought up at the August Town Council.
That would be an increase of, right now, it's 268 units on how many acres?
268 units on, they're about 36 acres.
36 acres and 268 units, and then another 8 acres, and they want to add 202 more units to the other 8 acres.
From 268 to 474.
I know what you're getting at, and I had the same analysis. But my understanding is the green area was intended to increase population as well. So it's not like all of this
Right,
increase is going on
right.
that. And so that I had to wrestle with that too, because it seems like it's a lot for that new area. But I'm trying to think of it in the whole totality, which helped me understand it a little bit better. Maybe the applicant can speak to
Right,
that.
no, that's great, and I actually was lucky enough to have the Mike Cameron tour of Phoenix earlier this week, so I understand what you're saying, yeah. But it is additional 8 acres and 202 additional units for a total of 474 from 268.
6.
206? You telling me my math is bad? I think it's probably, yeah, possible. Okay, cool, thank you.
Are there other?
Mr. Maddox, is the 268 also inclusive of the Shabui, the existing Shabui units, or are those only Peanut Village units currently located within the green?
I'm going to have to defer that to you. Might be able to answer on the
That's
spot, but I would
just
think
wondered, because there are units existing there.
Question, right. So how did you come to your totals?
on what was provided to me by the applicant seen here.
So that's information you've obtained from the applicant. You've not done a dare I say objective, but an individual count on your part?
Correct.
Okay. Understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions for staff before we move forward with the applicant? Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, if the applicant would like to come forward. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Thank you, Mason, for the presentation. I'm Bob Kuntz with Kuntz Jones Design Plus V3 at 140 Applecross Road in Pinehurst. I'm here this evening representing the applicant, Peanut Village, and would like to walk through the presentation. As we started back in August, and we've been working, I think, at that meeting, and then the meeting in August, you asked us to take about 60 days and go through a process and working with the neighbors. And we've done that, and we've made modifications to our application based on that meeting and future meetings. In that time, there was an acquisition of a piece of property, which Mason talked about. And we did delay in order to just bring that forward, rather than coming back in 3 months and adding that piece to a modification or something along that line. It seemed to be, since we had time, to bring it back in all at one time. In that time, we've met with the neighbors. We had another neighborhood meeting, went through that process, worked with the staff, and created this new application that you see today. What I'd like to do is just walk through the presentation and talk about the changes that we've made, show how we've addressed some of the neighbors' concerns, and work through the new application. I would like to ask that the council allow me to go through the entire presentation and have that discussion prior to asking questions. I think some of the slides may answer some of the questions that are generated during the process, so if you could allow me to do that, I'd appreciate it.
Perfect. I think that's our preferred format as well. Thank you.
First, as Mason mentioned, there are a lot of items in this document, or in the comprehensive plan, that really apply to this type of development. One item is specifically in the comprehensive plan is in Chapter 4 in the townwide concepts that talks about boomers. And it talks about specifically that there's a need for senior housing to allow and encourage seniors in Southern Pines to age in place and to have these opportunities for folks here. And I think that that's really important. I have been recently searching for a place for my mother and understanding the process and how little there is and little opportunity there is out there and how much of a waiting list there are at places. It can be kind of challenging. She did finally find a place and moved in last week, and she's very happy so far. But, at Phoenix Village in particular, there are all of the independent living facilities that are on the campus already are 100% occupied, or they're reserved for future residents at this point. Every new independent living unit that's under construction there now is 100% sold. They are sold out. There is also a waiting list of more than 250 people to get into Phoenix. So there is a demonstrated need across the county and in the town for this type of development. From the last application, this map's very similar, except for that little red box that you see. That is the additional acquired parcel on Delaware, and has basically squared off the parcel there and gotten the access on both sides of Shibui. Again, there is the main guard gated access is the yellow circle that you see on Main. That gate is a man gate. The green gates that you see there are unmanned gates and mostly exit traffic. And there will be a proposed gate on Shibui, or on Delaware Avenue, where you see the blue circle. And that access point would be a gated access also, resident-only access or exit. In the acquisition of the property, it created the parcel as an overall at about 8.48 acres. With that, there would be permitted under the RM1 zoning, about 102 units would be permitted on that tract of land as multifamily, as standard multifamily development. The FRR parcel is 36.32 acres and has an overall, there is no density associated with that 36.32 acres. So back to the density question that we're talking about, without the Shibui property, Phoenix Village could still develop the same number of units that are being requested here. So there's not a cap on the density currently on that piece of property. The FRR has no density cap. So under this scenario, all the 474, I think, units, 464, thanks. All of those units could be developed on the current property. So adding this actually reduces the overall density of the overall property by adding this, and it reduces what could be there. And in addition, by going through this PDP or CDP process, there is a cap. So the town will know how many units will go on this property eventually, and it can't exceed those numbers without going through another application and modifying the CDP. So without this, there is no cap on the FRR property. And there would be 102 units on the RM1 property. However, spreading it out across the entirety, it spreads it out across almost 9 more acres, 8.5 more acres. So looking at the site plan and looking at the setbacks, one of the things that we've done after the last meeting in hearing neighbor feedback was increase some of the buffers and setbacks and clarify some of the buffer standards. I think those were some of the things that came out of those meetings. So in this application, the original application called for a 15-foot building setback from the property boundary along Delaware. The property is on Delaware Avenue. In this case, and I'll go to a little more zoomed in version, you can see it a little bit better. That was called for in the original application. Since that time, we increased the buffer prior to the last council meeting. We had increased that buffer or that setback to 30 feet, which is consistent with the RM1 district. And since the last meeting, we have increased that setback again to 40 feet for any buildings that are over 35 feet in height. So following the The RM1 zoning classification is a 30-foot setback. We're following that for buildings under 35 feet and adding an additional 10 feet to that setback to help address the height issues from the neighboring properties and the bulk angle and the mass, and get it a little farther away from the property. In addition, we clarified in the language the 20-foot landscape buffer and what the requirements are for that landscape buffer, and that it would follow UDO standards for development. The phasing plan really hasn't changed. There is construction underway right now in phases A and B and C. E is the Shibui Gardens parcel. In the phasing discussion, most of our phasing was based on the town engineer's request that making sure the utilities are in place and that they're always consistently in place and that water lines are looped and those things. So it's, the phasing for the development is more based on utility availability and utility maintenance and making sure that the utilities are available. Again, here's the development tabulation. Currently, there are 268 units at Phoenix Village, and we are asking for an additional 206 for a total of 474. It's unclear what exactly, whether they would be independent living units, whether it would be single-family units, whether it would be skilled nursing, duplexes, or assisted living and memory care, but it will be some combination of those. So we're asking for the ability to do 206 additional units of some type, which may be in small duplexes, one-story duplexes, or they could be in four-story buildings across the site. And again, currently, those 474 units could go just on the FRR land. It's not, and it could be more than that too. And this, again, this application would limit the number across the entirety of the property. So the architectural standards, there was a lot of discussion during the council meetings about the building height. We had proposed a 70-foot building height at the time. There's a little bit of pushback on that. So we have reduced that down to 55 feet in the request. And the current buildings on site measured to the eave are 53 feet. There are several buildings on the site right now. And those are built into the side. They're basically a 3 stories on one side, 4 stories on the other, which is the intent of these as well. Again, and there's been a lot of discussion about the topography of the site, so the ability to build into the site really helps in getting to that. And that's the intent, to build very similar to the buildings that are currently on the campus. And I think one of Mason's photographs earlier showed sort of those buildings on the campus and where they're located. It's really to maintain the inviting nature of that campus now and the same character, the same look across the entirety of the campus. We haven't really changed the request for brick ratio, building materials, or building dimensions. The garages, we haven't really changed those at this point. And we did base all of these on items that PNIC had been granted in previous architectural compliance permit applications. So we're not asking for anything that hasn't been granted before. And we are asking for the ability to do that. And then, as Mason mentioned, asking for the ability to have the staff, if we're meeting these standards, rather than coming back before the council and an architectural compliance permit, being able to move forward with applications at staff level, just like the 10,000 square foot buildings that are there, that they're permitted to do now. We had discussion about the traffic. It's something that came up, so we took a look at the traffic. And this application with the 474 units, so low-rise multifamily housing units are a much greater traffic generator than a continuing care retirement community. So as a result, the 42 units of multifamily, with those 42 units that are existing, plus the existing PNIC, when you combine those versus the new 474 units at PNIC, you're looking at an increase of only about 122 new car trips per day. There's less than one car per unit and per person at PNIC Village, so it's a really low ratio of cars. And there's a lot to do on campus, meals and things like that, so it tends to stay very close and not have a lot of driving. So not only is it a reduction in overall trips, it's also a reduction in AM peak and PM peak trips. Because, those are mostly people going to work and doing those things. The increase in the overall, thinking about staffing, staffing won't really increase that much. It won't increase exponentially based on the new units. It won't increase nearly as much as the number of residents. One of the things that the traffic engineer did point out, because he's obligated, if he sees a deficiency, he's obligated to point it out. And he did see a dangerous situation that's existing today, and he recommended that a stop sign be added to the intersection of East Delaware Avenue and Youngs Road. It's a really strange intersection, and there's one route that doesn't have a stop sign. So he recommended that a stop sign be there. By his, by his license, if he sees a deficiency, even if it's not being created by the project, he's obligated to point it out. So since the last meeting and since the August hearing, we have made some changes and modifications to the application to address comments and some other items. In the parcels, we did add a 0.77 acre parcel at the corner of Shibui and Delaware. The building height was reduced from 70 to 55, 15-foot height reduction. We also clarified in the application, because there was discussion, how many stories could that be? So we clarified, there was discussion about 7 stories and those kinds of things. So we clarified that it would be no greater than 4 stories. There would be a maximum of 4 stories on the property, which buildings are today on the property. And then the buffers and setbacks. We clarified the 20-foot landscape buffer and the thickness of it. It's going to be a pretty thick buffer based on town standard. We increased the setback on the properties along Delaware from 15 feet, the original application. And then we went to 30 feet for a building setback for buildings under 35 feet and extended that to 40 feet for buildings over 35 feet. In addition, we increased the open space width from 10 feet to 20 feet. And those were the modifications that we made. In addition, there were other items that came up during the hearing that Phoenix Village has worked to address. One item was stormwater management. Since the storms, they did damage the stormwater management ponds and things like that. Since that time, those ponds have been repaired. They've been repaired from the storms. They've been reviewed by the town and are compliant with town standards and the town requirements for those basins. In addition, there was discussion about fire protection and the yelp when the fire trucks pull up at those intersections at the gates. They have to yelp to get in at the gates. They have been investigating. They've talked with the fire marshal about other options, and they're trying to figure out what the best option is. There are radio calls where you can tune to a radio station. The fire marshal the fire trucks have a responder on it, and it can open without the yelp. The fire marshal will still require the yelp regardless at the gates, just as a backup if the other doesn't work. So he will still require it, but it is a way to maybe reduce many of the calls. Also, there was a lot of discussion about construction parking along Ridge Street and all the construction traffic up and down Ridge Street. The applicant has worked with a contractor, with Bloom Contracting, who was doing the work there on campus, and they are now parking remotely and then coming in. They're bringing them in smaller car loads, and they're parking in other locations remotely, and they're bringing them in. So they're no longer parking along Ridge Street, and it's opened up Ridge Street, so that's not an issue anymore. So now at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have related to the application and the amended application.
All right, thank you so much. Council, do you have questions? Ms. Peterson?
Assertion that the original stormwater pond adhered to the stipulations of the town?
Yes. But it wasn't complete at the time. It wasn't complete. It was in the middle of construction when the storm hit.
And so construction was well underway and the pond was not complete, is that right?
They were waiting on a pipe to come in to be installed.
And when did that pipe arrive, if you know?
Ms. Peterson, I think
don't
let's
know.
stick to questions that are, no, I'm sorry, you cannot tell people.
Interrupting? I'm
No,
gonna
there's
ask you to
actually
do
nothing
that.
about not interrupting. It's
Right.
actually about staying on topic. And right now, I'd like you to ask questions about this application.
I am. I
Okay,
am.
Mr. Coons, please only answer questions that are about this application. Thank you.
So you have asserted then that you think the stormwater pond was not complete.
I think that's also
As
not on this
built-
application.
as the-
Do you have a question that is on this application?
I'm really interested in not being interrupted as I
And I'm
ask
interested in
follow-up
you staying on
questions.
topic, which I've asked you 3 times now. Do you have a question or not? Mr. Goodman, do you have a question? All right, I do have questions, but I'll work to my other council members first.
I guess my questions would go to the building size. And so I know you've got the lower number, you said it's 55. Current buildings are 53. Which ones are those? Because I know currently, the new ones on that A are the most ones where you're like, it's close to the edge and you can kind of see them. I don't think those are 53-foot buildings. So which ones on campus are currently at that 53 feet? If you know.
I think showed the Woodlands drawing, the Woodlands
Is it like
buildings.
the center building or the 4-story apartment? The Woodlands, okay.
Where is which building? It's that group in the middle, right?
Okay,
So those are the tallest.
gotcha. So to me, yes, you're correct. I think those are situated to where from May or excuse me, Ridge or Delaware, those don't stand out or stick out. And I know you indicated that you intended to mirror that. I guess I'm just like, what in there makes sure that a building of that scope is not going to be right along the 20-foot buffer line, along Delaware or right on Ridge? I know you don't know exactly yet where things are going to go, but how do we make sure that those size scope buildings stay kind of like that one is to where they're more interior?
Yeah, I think that's what we were trying to do with the 40-foot setback and trying to do that for buildings over 35 feet in height. That's what we're proposing. If it goes over 35 feet in height, it would be 40 feet back. It would be a little additional buffer. The goal, those buildings, the Woodlands are right on top of the hill and they're built into the hill. And that's the goal here as well, to build those buildings into that hillside.
And that was my next question that you said. So I know, so I went by there just to make sure it was fresh in my mind. There was an estate sale today at that one property, if you were over that way. But it's sloped. And so we've had this conversation before about what do you mean when you say 55-foot at average grade? Because we've had the conversation before where something was built on a slope and you have the height requirement, but it would somehow require the backside, the bottom of the hill to be 65 feet because of this average grade discussion. I know we want to avoid that. And so how do you factor that not happening in?
Yeah, the goal here is that it's a 4-story requirement. The town's ordinance is building height at the front of the building, and it'd be the average at the front of the building. So wherever that is, and if it's a 3-4 walkout, like a lot of the buildings are over there today, where it's 3 stories on one side and there's an additional story on the side that's built into the hill. The goal would be the front side would be the 35 feet, and the back side would be the 53 feet in height, 55 feet in height. I understand what you're saying. I think when we get to applications, the PDP applications, that will be something that will be part of the PDP application to show how that operates and how that works. So, and how those pieces come together.
At that point, would there be a visual, like an eye level?
There would be.
Okay.
Right now, we really, this is a conceptual plan. There's not really a detail of exactly where the buildings are going to go, and we don't have the exact topography.
For the Director Grieve, I know it's going to be a lot easier to have these discussions at the PDP when we have a little more definitive nature, sorry. But do we need to establish that? Because what Mr. Kunz just said, okay, if it's the slope, at the back might be the 55, but the front's going to be less. Do we need to make sure that that requirement, if one of those buildings is on the slope, is in these details now? Or is that something that we could reserve for CDP or PDP when we see a little more about where they're putting things?
Great question. So the way that will work is that my understanding from my colleague Mason is that the CDP at this time does not contain a unique definition of building height,
Okay.
unique to Phoenix Village CDP. Therefore, correct? It does not contain a unique definition of building height.
It says to the eve. So it does say to the eve.
In the CDP? It does. Okay. We'll pull that up real quick, because we obviously have the definition of, if something is not stipulated in the CDP as unique, then it defaults to the UDO. And our UDO definition of building height, I have here, thank you. The height of a building is the vertical distance measured from the mean elevation of the finished grade at the front of the building to the highest point of the building. And we're going to pull up under 4.2.3, thank you, Mason. Under 4.2.3 of the proposed CDP that you're considering tonight, and you could modify prior to approval, you could allow to go forward as is. Here's what it reads. The building height of up to 55 feet, a building height of up to 55 feet is permitted. Building height is to be measured from the front of the building to the eave of the building at the average grade of the building. Sloped roofs will not be included in the calculation of building height. Buildings will be a maximum of 4 stories. So you have 55 feet to the eave, and sloped roofs are not to be counted.
That sounds fairly consistent, doesn't it?
I don't want you to read the whole thing over again, but in the beginning part of that, you mentioned something about the mean grade. Did I hear that?
So yep, no problem. And these are short, so we can go over them. So the current UDO definition of building height is it's the height of a building is the vertical distance measured from the mean elevation of the finished grade of the front of the building. So the mean elevation of the finished grade of the height of the front of the building is because sometimes that grade is off a little bit, and we do measurements on this all the time, to the highest point of the building. The highest point of the building will obviously be the peak of the roof, whether if it's like a hip roof. Under the proposed, the height would go from measured from the front of the building, just the front of the building, to the eave of the building at the average grade of the building. So that's very similar to mean elevation of the finished grade at the front, the eave of the building at the average grade of the building. Sloped roof, the biggest change is that sloped roofs are not included. So you go to the eave, and then that's 55 feet. So a steeply pitched roof could add a fair bit of height and therefore have an appearance of a much taller building, potentially.
And it does sound like from that definition, unless I've totally missed it, I know Bob said that wasn't their intention, but by that definition, if it's measured from the front, if it was sloped, that back side could be higher than 55 feet if measured from
if the slope was sloping downhill from the front of the building to the
which
back.
it absolutely does, going towards Delaware.
Yeah, then at the back, it could have the appearance of being much taller in addition to yeah.
I think we can take the average grade part out and just go with.
Like if you could just say at least for me to avoid that any building facing, I guess, the first building after the buffer along Delaware, or I guess just D and E, it measured as from what is seen from the street, not the front. I think that's what you described, but I guess I could see where later, if it's not you and it's somebody else, they could make it be a lot bigger on that street facing than the 50 feet.
I think one of the other things too, if you're thinking about sight lines and thinking about the slope going up, right? You're thinking about the slope going up this way. I wish I could draw somewhere. But if you're thinking about slope going up this way, and if you're in a house on Delaware Avenue sitting here, and there is a big buffer, landscape buffer here, and that building is 40 feet away. That's why we've increased those setbacks and up those buffer standards. If you're looking at it and you're looking at from your house, if there's a building up here, you're looking this way to look up, and if there's a hedge that's this high or a large landscaping piece that's here, by the time you start looking at that, from a sight line, you're looking over that buffer, you're looking into the buffer, you're not really looking at the roof behind. And that's why we added that extra distance, and we added the larger buffer through there, specifically so if you're downhill looking up, that you're not looking into the building, you're looking into a landscape or looking at the sky, one or the other. That's what we're trying to do. And that's why we've increased those buffers, setbacks, and included the additional landscape.
What's that? Yeah, got it.
Curious, Mr. Coons, I think you said you had like 2 other meetings with the residents in the area. Oh, 1 other meeting, okay, I'm sorry. I've been off of my numbers. I told you 464, it was 474, I'm sorry. What was the general, this time?
I think and Joel, I think they thought we'd come a long way. I think there was still concern over the building height. And there was discussion about a trail along Ridge Street, quite a bit of discussion about Ridge Street. And one of the things that came up, and I think the planning board addressed it in their recommendations, was about allowing a trail along Ridge Street in front. And Phoenix has no issues with that trail being in the right-of-way, and whatever needs to happen in the right-of-way, perfectly happy with having a trail out there. It would be good for the residents there too, and I think from a broader trail transportation plan, I think it'd be great for Southern Pines as well.
Something that Phoenix is willing to pay for?
That they're not at this point in time, because there's just not a way to get an estimate for that, and there are a lot of stipulations around building something in the town's right-of-way with tree clearing and things like that, because there are a lot of trees in that right-of-way. So in order to build that trail, there would have to be a lot of trees cleared. The cost of those things is just not a way to figure out what that cost is. I think that's where Phoenix's position is at this point in time.
Sidewalk on that road.
Right.
I know, I mean, because I walk on the street right there, which
Yeah.
luckily is low traffic right now, but
I think that was one of the neighbors' concerns about
Yeah.
people right now are walking on Ridge Street and being able to get them off and then being able to bike to other locations. Yeah, for sure.
So on the phasing slide, do you all have a timeline? I think one of the public comments in August was, there was information that Phoenix would develop, but it would be a 10 or 20-year timeline. Do you have a timeline at this point for those phases, or is this all happening at once?
Oh, it's definitely not happening.
Okay, well, I think that's what people are interested in, because it feels like a lot of change. So do you all have an idea?
It would likely take probably 5 years of phase, so it would probably be 15 years at the earliest for all that to happen.
Okay.
Probably even longer than that.
Okay. I was like, if it goes like any building, it's longer than that. And then the buffer, you're actually on the slide already. The buffer lines where you have 3 or 4 color dashed lines.
Yeah. it's a little-
Help me understand, do you add them up, or is it the greater of? How does that work?
It's the one that applies, so.
Okay. Oh, based on the building height.
Yeah, exactly. So the orange line is fence along the property edge. The yellow line is the landscape buffer. The red line is for buildings that follows the RM1 standard for buildings under 35 feet. And the blue line is for buildings above 35 feet.
Okay.
It gives a 40.
Okay. All right, thank you. Ms. Peterson, do you have a question?
The Woodlands do not have parking underneath, correct? That's correct. So the height of the Woodlands is 53 without parking underneath. Is that to the tip of the roof?
To the eave. To the eave.
And that's an internal, by eave, you mean to internal?
To the eve, I mean where the gutter line runs.
The gutter line runs, okay. And the proposed building that was originally cited as possibly going at the corner of Ridge and Delaware, or around in that area, was going to have parking beneath, is that correct?
Potentially. Okay.
Do you want to come to the microphone?
Alva Cromartie, CEO, Phoenix Village. Please feel free to call me Chip. And yes, potentially parking underneath the building. The latest buildings we've put together have parking underneath.
And do you count that as one of your stories?
It would be, yes. It would be counted as one of the stories.
Okay, thank you. I think, why don't we take a moment to have public comments, and then we will have you guys come back up if we have other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Yes.
very quickly, one clarification based upon your presentation, because I had asked it earlier of Planner Maddox. I believe over the entirety of the acreage, at least based upon the traffic impact analysis you showed, there's actually 310 units on the acreage, being 268 and then 42 Shibui apartments.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
My second concern, and I'll defer certainly to Attorney McCarley on this, and I think I brought this up a couple months back when the first application came through. You use language relative to a staff review of the architecture in the future. And that language that I saw again on this and in the application is that if it meets UDO requirements. However, I'm also reading a request within the CDP that the 80% brick facade be dropped to 25%, which is perfectly fine to ask for architectural standards outside of the UDO within the CDP. Are you suggesting that the staff would be able to approve future projects if they meet 80%? Or are you asking for that at the 25% based upon existing facilities that have been approved by the council in the past? And this is just simply to clear the record and make sure whatever we adopt, a future planning department, a future manager, a future council is following the intent and not an interpretation of what appears to be a potential conflict.
Yes, and I think the way we worded it, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the way we worded it was such that it would follow UDO standard, or if there was a CDP standard, that the brick in particular, that it would be permitted to follow the UDO standard here. And again, these were standards that have been granted in other architectural compliance
Previous
permits.
deviations understood. It's
Just trying to bake that in, and then if those are baked in and assumed, then having the staff review and approve.
I believe that was your intent, but
That
when
is
I
the
when I
intent.
see basic language of follow UDO standard, I had to ask the question.
Understood. That is the request.
What was the purpose? I mean, I guess I understand a little bit, streamlines it a little bit, but I mean, we do them routinely, even though I know our attorney says we should not be. But what was the intent for removing the architectural review from us and letting BJ and his folks do that?
You're right, expediting the process and being able to move through the process quicker, and protecting the look of Phoenix and baking that in, so it becomes more of a codified rule versus, subject to future councils or, other things down the future, being able to protect Phoenix with the character that it wants to be.
Thank you. Why don't we go ahead and move on to public comments? We don't have any formal organization, so if you'll just make your way up to the microphone when there's an opportunity and introduce yourself.
Joel Carner, 465 East Delaware. Always a pleasure to speak to the board. I know you guys are always looking forward to me being up here and giving you the good answers up here. So I believe I have a briefing. Did we pass out let me pass these out. If you read the email I sent you, this was an attachment if you were allowed to read it, but I'm going to hand these out now. These are. I basically have all of the information more or less in my slide presentation. The first thing I do want to start off by saying, hey, we definitely want to see Phoenix Village move on and pass even tonight. We have, hopefully tonight, we have brought up a bunch of major issues. And this was exactly what was presented to the planning board. I got 15 signatures on that, all from the neighbors, minus a few people that are renting those properties. I don't know if you want to take a few moments to review that before I start.
Is there
Making sure that
just,
we're not
is there one
missing-
sheet front and back?
Okay, it's just one sheet, 2 pages. We got it, okay. We were all looking for the second page, but it's on the back.
How do I run that? Is there a way to start? Put a presentation up? Yay.
Go ahead. I think we're ready
Okay,
for
I
you.
was just waiting for,
Yes.
it looked like people were still reading there. So obviously, we've been discussing building heights, and Commissioner Pate, I appreciate you really getting down to the bottom of what that means. If you've read this, this is directly out of the comprehensive plan. The neighbors of Phoenix expansion are not asking for anything more than what was given to us in the comprehensive plan. Direct quote. So I want to read this first one to you. New lots or buildings that are significantly different in mass or scale from adjacent development should be located toward the center of the site, with lots and building sizes near the perimeter designed to transition to the scale or massing of existing surrounding development. So if you look at this, and I hope you can kind of see that directly out of the comprehensive plan here, I just want to point out that we have, and do I have a, well, my pointer doesn't really work up there, so. Can I have this right here? Can everyone hear me okay? Sorry, I'm going to have to go old school with my pen here. But what they're showing you here is we have an activity center that's directly rated to, that's connected to a little bit of a green buffer, where then you get an alleyway that's also a bicycle path, that you then have one-story garages, open space, two-story houses, and then this right here with the larger three-story houses in the center of the property. I understand that there's some difficulties with topography, but let me just give you an idea of how that looks along here. So that's the three-story building from North Ridge. I'm not sure how far of a buffer that is with trees in the buffer and how far that building away is, but for the neighbors who live there, to them, that seems big enough. On the opposite side of the street, there are, sorry, I guess I have another picture in here I'm going to show you at some point. But there are houses there, 1, 2, and 2.5, there's one house that's 2.5 stories along North Ridge. One of them was built in 1920, 4 built in the 1930s, 3 of those in 1930 exactly, 1 in 1932, and then it gets into the next 4 built in the 1940s and early 50s. So the average,
Joel, I don't want to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but I also want to make sure that we get through all of our presentations within a reasonable amount of time. I think that we understand that the building height and transition to neighborhood scale makes
Okay.
sense. Okay.
Well, that's something that's why we're saying keep it to 3 stories. Beyond 4 stories, it just seems too much. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the heights that the planning board did not pick up was the fact that they were saying, like, Penick was trying to point out that they were saying, put the larger buildings on the perimeter, and that's exactly the opposite of what our comprehensive plan says. So we're trying to get to do that.
Okay.
And I'm not sure I need to touch really on this, but this is what Aberdeen did when presented with the 4-story building. They went with the 3-story building in top, and they went with the 4-story building in back. Thank you, Anna, for that story. Appreciate that. And so the other thing that we want is a transition there. If we can't have everything, and some of the neighbors will bring up some other points, but we definitely want to get our parents walking with their children and strollers off the streets. Stop them being streetwalkers, get them on a path. And the path, if you read what the planning board put out there, and I guess I can use this now. If you read what the planning board put and you go to that map, it's actually going along along North Ridge, all the way up to the official entrance at Weymouth. So that goes along that whole path. That would allow, just the allowance to build that is, I think, necessary to get everyone off the street, connecting all of our neighborhoods the way that they should be connected, just like our comprehensive plan says. So once again, I'm going to just, here's straight out of the comprehensive plan. We have 2 different neighborhoods, green space in between with a connection to the greenway and sidewalks in between. Exactly what we're asking for there. So just to know, for me, the most important question that I asked last time I was standing up here in front of the town council on this subject was, while we lose so much, what's in it for us? And so the question that was brought to me, well, what do we lose? Well, besides our low-income housing, we also lose a certain amount of our tax base. I went up to our county tax office and got the tax records since 2016 to 2025.
I'm going to actually stop you there too, because they've already purchased the building. We can't go back on that. I mean, if they're pulling it off our tax records, it's already done. And
I
we
think it's a
cannot-
relevant point.
The point is taken, but I think that,
It's a relevant point. Let's let him continue. Thank you.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Peterson. I think you're confused at who runs these meetings, and it is me. I understand that
Mr.
there's a concern
McCarley,
about, I'm so sorry. If you interrupt again,
Can
I'm
we-
going to call you out of order and ask you to turn your microphone off.
Mr.
Yes, I
McCarley, can we
understand
get
that there's a
legal read
concern.
on this?
Okay, you're now out of order. Please stop.
Can we get a legal read on whether or not I can be heard?
Mr. McCarley, who runs this meeting? Thank you so much. I do appreciate the input, because it is important, and it's absolutely important to us, but we can't have them sell it and put it back into the tax rounds. Like, it is already off.
We're just saying that the citizens are going to have to pick that up. It's going away, right?
Yep.
That is something that we are losing.
The point is heard. I do appreciate it.
And what we want in return is what we've been guaranteed, our comprehensive plan, to be executed as it's supposed to be. So, a goal without a plan is simply a wish. And we have our comprehensive plan, and it has goals in it. And I'd like you to make that comprehensive plan not a wish. Please make it a reality. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. All right, who is our next speaker?
Hi, Maureen O'Hara, 560 East Delaware. I appreciate all the changes and accommodations that Peanut Village has made to our long list of concerns. And I appreciate all the work that Joel has done, because he's done a tremendous amount of work in terms of making sure that the town sticks to the comprehensive plan, the 24 comprehensive plan. I think my biggest concerns are still, after they revised the plans, they had a neighborhood meeting, and there are still some items like stormwater management, things that we were told were just not at that stage yet. And I'm concerned about, is there a mechanism in place when we get to the stage, when we talk about stormwater basin placement and actual building height, for us to be heard and you guys to make a decision instead of it going to the town staff? Is there a mechanism in place for that?
The CDP, but I think it sounds like our council is also interested in maybe maintaining architectural design review,
Okay.
which would also give you time to be heard.
Stormwater, correct me, planning, is at the PDP or at even the next level after that, where there is a meeting for that placement?
Required to submit a conceptual stormwater management plan, and usually do show what they have in mind, the direction the property slopes, et cetera. So they're likely the stormwater management is going to have to go downhill because water runs downhill. But then with the details of that, strict conformance with state and local requirements for stormwater, it comes at the site plan review, which of course is done by technical staff.
Because the plan is conceptual, and so instead of there being a single-level duplex behind our house plus a stormwater drainage basin, there could be conceivably a 4-story building or a 3-story building. And I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to address each of our concerns when the time comes, instead of it being swept through now, and then it goes straight to the town staff, and we have no recourse in the future.
I think that's reasonable.
So what's the answer?
The answer is
What
that
is the, I mean, is there a mechanism in place, and what is that mechanism, and when does it happen?
So I think that's what our Director Grieve was trying to address, is that there are different times when those things do come up, and they do come before us.
Okay.
So to say, we'll start to see a little bit of the details at the preliminary development plan. That's another hearing here. It'll be just like this one. And then I guess our site plan reviews, is that a public meeting as well now?
Meetings of the Technical Review Committee that occur on Tuesday afternoons at 1:30 are meetings of a public body and therefore are open to the public for observation, but they are not public hearings.
It would be, I'm sorry.
PDP would be publicly announced.
PDP is a
Publicly
evidentiary
announced.
hearing to render a quasi-judicial decision regarding conformance with the CDP. And the CDP,
It's a lot of jargon. I know it sounds confusing.
it's fair,
Yes.
fair, good point. The jargon bell. It's not intentional, ma'am.
If I may-
Like, it's like if you're talking to your dentist about how they take a tooth out, you're not going to understand it, but it's okay. Like, let me try again, because it's a fair point. This is the zoning. The property is being zoned in a unique manner. They're writing the zoning, and they're asking the town council to approve it. But this zoning, as you saw the phasing plan, it has multiple phases. So what they have to do is when they come in to develop a phase, they have to come in with another request to the town, another proposal, to put some more, to go from like a 40% concept to go to like a 60 or 70% concept to say, this is what we're going to do. And that's the point at which it has to come back here. Now, that hearing is a little bit different. This one is a hearing to write zoning, therefore it's called legislative. And there's a lot of discretion you can hear from everybody because you're adopting the rules. Later, the meeting is going to be to verify, are you complying with the rules that we adopted now? And in that process, only problems that are contrary to the zoning are on the table to be discussed. Does that make sense? So there's less, that's fair.
I just want to make sure, because they say they're going from 42 units and adding 206 units in Zone E, which is part of behind my house. And I would like to make sure that whatever's, they finally decide, if it's not going to be decided today, which it's not,
No,
that
but-
when they are submitting this proposal, we have something in place where we,
So what I would suggest, so what we are doing today, because it's legislative, we can listen to all the inputs and we can create the CDP in a way that really adheres to what the neighbors want to see. So if there is something specific that you want, ask for it now, and we will try to build it into what's happening. So when they come back with a 60-70% plan, they have to adhere to what we decide tonight.
And the number of units that he mentioned would be part of one of those rules
right.
within the PDP.
Well, I mean, we did this at the August meeting.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
feel
I know,
like
but
I'm
we're
asking the same
restarting.
questions over and over, and you're just saying, no, we're going to talk about this later, and you're not.
No, so I'm asking, well, we will make a decision tonight. We will set the CDP. If it gets approved, there will be a CDP that we decide and vote upon. If there is something specific that you want, tell us now, and we will write it into the CDP. If it's reasonable and they agree to it, we will get it into the CDP so they have to follow it. Does that make sense?
Right, well.
Okay, what would you
originally,
like?
I would like a solid 6-foot, at least 6-foot brick wall boundaring the Peanut Shibui, this new section that they're sort of enveloping into their campus and this new zoning along all the houses on East Delaware. And then I think I would like a more like number of units, housing units, instead of going from 42 to 206, maybe something less dense.
Okay.
Those are two things that I don't think have been addressed in all the changes that they made, and we appreciate the changes that they made. But those are two things that I haven't, and the stormwater management, I haven't heard anything about that. Like making sure that any kind of stormwater runoff, existing sewer lines, water usage goes inward to that campus, and they don't have to cut through any of our yards to go downhill to a gravity-driven existed sewer line. I don't know if you guys think about that stuff, but I do. So,
I think, I can't promise I mean, I appreciate the specifics, and I can't make promises on what we are able to do. But I appreciate that you giving us a list, and we will take it into consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
Reagan, are you trying to say something?
To respond to the question I believe I was hearing, and at the fear of potentially oversimplifying, but I don't think so. Number one, the 206 units, again, as I understand it, is across the entire property. It's not just where the 42 currently are. I think that's important to be understood. Relative to architecture, you're making a decision potentially this evening, or at least on this application, relative to whether you're going to provide for the staff review that they have requested at the deviations from the current UDO or not. Otherwise, that architecture, if it's above a 10,000 square foot facility, is going to come back before the town council. Again, not a public hearing, but at the very least, it would come back as an AR. On the stormwater, as was stated, the PDP is going to come back in with the mix of buildings that they're looking to do for any particular area. It could be cottages, it could be maybe 55-foot buildings at the eve, if that's what you approve in the CDP. And obviously, the mix of those structures and where they are located on the property is going to demand slightly different looks at that conceptual stormwater plan. So you would see a conceptual plan, sort of like what's on your phasing plan map there, that's going to show the general location of, if they're using stormwater ponds, where that might go. They may choose to deal with stormwater in a completely different manner. They may go with underground systems. They may do any number of things. But the determination of that is going to be very much built around what it is they are building and where it goes on that property. And that's where it ends up at the site plan, and not completely engineered when it comes back here at PDP for the council. So just in an attempt to answer what may come back here or may not, some of that could be decided this evening or with eventual action on this application. But relative to the specifics of stormwater design, those are going to have to follow all of the state and local standards and be handled at the technical level with staff. What you will see come back in with a PDP is the conceptual handling of that, which could allow for discussion at PDP time around things like a brick wall or other things of that nature. And that may or may not make sense depending upon what kinds of buildings are in that PDP and where they are located on the campus. So to jump forward to something like that might be getting ahead of the game, and maybe something that you're then looking at a request for a deviation later, because it just simply doesn't work from an engineering standpoint, or would require an awful lot of grading on the site, that then you start talking about tree removal and getting into buffers and things. So it is frustrating, and it is a very lengthy process. As was stated, this may be a 15 to 20 year type of window, but before you even get into certain phases that are on that screen. But the details will matter, and there's a timing when those details come forward.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else from the public?
Chris Smithson, 570 South May Street. Germaine to this last part of your discussion, yes, this is a legislative decision, not a quasi-judicial decision where you all have to go, sorry, we can't listen to you, our hands are tied, we're forced to approve this. You don't have to prove anything, and you don't have to give a reason for approving or disapproving, other than, I think, that statement of whether or not it goes with the plan. But remember, this is the time where you can approve nothing or something that meets what you want to see happen. Let me start off my comments about continuing care retirement communities, or CCRCs. And be sure I'm clear that I have nothing against Phoenix Village or St. Joseph's or any of the CCRCs that are in town. I have friends and family that have lived or worked there or been on the board, so they give great care, and the people who live there enjoy it. So I'm not talking about that whatsoever. I'm going to talk about our comprehensive plan and going to contradict the staff's report that it's all in compliance with our comprehensive plan. So starting with policy 7.1, which is one of the sections that I believe the staff report said it was in compliance with. I believe that in 7.1 is support housing diversity in the community. And if you look on that page in the plan, in the colored header at the top, it actually says expand housing options to help maintain affordability in a way that protects neighborhood character. And certainly promoting affordability by getting rid of some of the relatively affordable housing in town does not advance that policy. Again, policy 7.5 talks about affordable housing, which this does not promote in any way. Policy 1.1, sorry, I'm jumping around, but policy 1.1 encourages the staff to conduct research to identify potential ways to consider vulnerabilities to neighborhood gentrification and displacement during the review of development applications. Certainly, this has already displaced people, but you're making a zoning decision to bring in the property that the displaced people were living in. Chapter 5, with the colored headline at the top of the page on 213, maintain healthy fiscal balance and find new resources to help fund community needs. As we know, or should know, CCRCs, and the only ones in this whole county, are in Southern Pines, and they do not pay any property taxes. We're going to get into that a little bit deeper in a minute.
Before you go too deep on it, though, our attorney has said that we can't consider, what was the specific, tax value?
Tax status is not a land use criteria. It's not relevant to this decision.
Then you don't state it as your reason. I'm just, it's part of the decision and it's in our plan.
Yep.
Again, page 35 addresses long-term financial stability. We've had workshops and chapters in the plan talking about missing middle housing concepts. This does not promote that. And I'm going to get into numbers. So I've been on this thing for years and years. A previous CEO of PNIC called me in to try and get me to shut up somehow. He gave me a great tour of PNIC. It's great. He said, Chris, what am I going to have to get you to shut up? And I said, well, at the time, the average homeowner in Southern Pines subsidized CCRCs to the tune of about $100 a year. They paid $100 higher in taxes because these places were not taxable. And he said, Chris, what could I do to get you to be happy with the community benefits that we do? And I said, well, maybe you could go knock on the door of everybody in town and get at least half the people, after hearing your spiel, to say, darn tootin', I'm happy that I'm paying an extra $100 a year in taxes. Now it's $200. The total CCRC value as per the county in town is $358,529,670, which is $1 million in avoided taxes, which is 8% of our budget based on the most recent budget document. So between county and town taxes, every homeowner in Southern Pines pays $200 extra in taxes because of tax-free resort retirement, which is how these particular ones have been advertised before.
Just walk me through your math. So the math is not their drain on our resources spread out among our citizens. Your math is, if it were all taxable, that's how much more money we would get.
At
and
least that
therefore-
much, because I'm sure that the guys at the tax department, when they go at appraisals, don't look at these places as closely as they do at my house if I snuck a deck on the back of it without them knowing about it. So the 358 million could be an understatement because it's a zero tax bill. And to be clear, there are organizations or businesses in town that provide similar services that actually do pay taxes. Southern Pines Gracious Retirement, whatever they call themselves now, the one down at Pennsylvania and the Service Road, they pay $126,187 according to the county. And definitely the place with a different name now is the one across from the movie theater in Bruce Wood. And they pay, I think it was 70-some thousand in taxes for similar type services. So, you know, you don't have to approve this, and you are approving the expansion of this. And at some point, you know, that's why we've put more constraints on CCRCs in the past, because they're just growing, and they had this special status, even though there are other places that provide similar services that don't have to pay taxes. So I think it is very germane to the decision-making with anything you do that shows that we have hundreds of millions of dollars of, I'm not even going to get into churches, I'm just talking about these resort retirement communities that use our services for no tax dollars like the rest of us have to pay. You mentioned fire truck entrances and all that. When I was a kid, my dad was a volunteer firefighter in town, and his beeper would go off all the time. The joke, I don't know the percentages, but half the time it was a false alarm at Phoenix. So you're sending the whole fire department out there all the time. I think once the town threatened to start charging them for it, they fixed their fire alarm or whatever, but it's a big deal. And that $1 million in tax revenue that we're missing out of on the town could buy our fire department a new fire truck every year. So
I'm afraid.
it's a consideration.
Yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
I appreciate the input. Part of the reason that I ask you to specify your numbers is it's almost like a recommendation to make them taxable, which I think is above our purview. Yeah, yeah, I get it.
May
Okay.
I say it just one last time?
Yes.
Council may not use tax status of the property as any part of a decision on whether or not to approve rezoning.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there other public comments? Mr. McInerney. So we are more than 30 minutes into public comment, which we try to keep under 30. So I'm still bringing you up to speak. That's why I'm trying to keep each person speaking to a reasonable amount of time. And I do not expect that you would be unreasonable. I'm just letting you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. The public comments at the beginning were 3 minutes. I'm okay with that.
This one's not limited. It's just trying to keep
I know,
everyone's.
I understand that.
Okay.
But I guess I would have preferred that you don't sort of say, you might want to shorten it a little bit.
Why don't you stick to what we're talking about, and then we'll get out of our meeting on time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just doesn't start off well.
I mean, the other option is I could say that we're going to cut it off per our bylaws or our policies and just not have more public comment, but I don't want to do that. I would like to hear what you have to say. I'm just going to, every person that comes up, I'm going to remind you guys that we do have to keep the meeting moving along.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And my interest is not to somehow derail, not that I would if I could, Phoenix. It's mainly, I guess, I'll focus on height, which has been a topic. Because they want, just to reiterate, and while I'm at it, so CDP level, somebody, anybody, correct me if I'm wrong, just to clarify one more time for everybody in the public. Here's where common folk can talk. When we get to the PDP, which is quasi-judicial, legislative, no,
Quasi-
quasi-judicial, or evidentiary. Only smart people can talk. They have to have, by which I mean, you have to have qualifications. You have to be an engineer, you have to be, So, folks, here's where common folk can talk. So, next time, only experts can talk.
Well, before you say that, I have never not allowed people to speak in a quasi-judicial hearing. We've always allowed public comment. You just can only consider expert witnesses when it comes to traffic or property value.
Okay. I just want everybody to be clear as to, this is the main place where ordinary folk can talk.
Okay.
The height thing is, that I guess that bothers me, is the UDO goes to tallest part of the building. They want a deviation, which is a fairly significant deviation, that everybody needs to be clear on, that it only goes to the eave, which is basically, as someone said, where the gutter goes. So from there to the top could be another 20, 30 feet. That's a pretty good, now, I'm not saying it will be, I'm saying we don't know, that I'm aware of. And I don't know that at this point, it can be pinned down as to what that will be, but I think that's something that ought to be considered. There are setbacks, the way this proposal has put, I guess, larger setbacks on Delaware, but evidently not on Ridge. And I'm thinking it would probably, if it's appropriate for Delaware, it probably is also appropriate for Ridge. And if you look on the, not this one, but on one of them, you'll see the 40-foot dotted line is along Delaware and along, I don't think it's on much of Ridge. It may be, whatever, is it Bishop's Ridge? Is that the name of that other place that may get absorbed someday? That it goes along Bishop's Ridge, but it doesn't go along Ridge Street in general. And I would think if you're going to do it for Delaware, why not do it for Ridge? Just a thought. The other thing, getting down to the nitty-gritty, but now's as good a time as any to get down to some nitty-gritty. That extended 40-foot setback was for buildings exceeding 35 feet in height. Okay? Who's 35 feet in height? By which I mean, are you measuring to the eave, which is what they want in general, or are you measuring by the UDO, which is to the top? To me, it's not clear, and maybe I'm just dense. That's entirely possible. Okay. Good. Don't have to duck. So I don't know where that 35 feet in height is. And I think you might want to know which it is. So that my main objective is so that we all know what we're talking about. And not later, somebody says, oh, well, I thought it was this. Oh, no, I thought it was that. Get your ducks in a row now. And folks, get your ducks in a row now, because this is the main time when we can talk. And I don't know, so I'd ask it more as a question. So this is conceptual. But so I guess we're not pinning down, for example, the height of the buildings, specific buildings on here.
I think that we'll probably talk about height. I think you've made that point. We will have that conversation tonight. But where the buildings are located will be pinned down in the CDP, which is what Director Grieve was telling Ms. O'Hara
In the
earlier.
PDP.
In the PDP, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So it's sort of up in the air as to, are they really going to be having tall buildings on Ridge, for example, or Delaware, right at the edge?
But
You got tall buildings more in the middle now.
We can
Yeah,
address that.
we can do that tonight.
So I guess I'm raising it just so that it's a topic
Yeah, I
for
think
your
Ms. O-
consideration now.
Yeah, Ms.
That's-
O'Hara, I think, was asking that as well. Okay.
That's what I care about, that as much as possible, things get pinned down now, and it's not a matter of, oh, whoops, we should have thought of that before, and now it's too late. Thank you.
Is there anyone else with the public comment? What we've heard so far is height of buildings, the setback, the tax issue, which we cannot consider, stormwater. Let me see if I've missed anything else. Yep, setback on ridge. And being specific on height and locations in the building that are allowed. Is there any other public comment outside of those? Good evening.
Again, Penick Village resident, I just want to point out, we have worked really, really hard on getting this to the point where it can be approved. We're proud of it. We need it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for being here again. Bless you. All right, are there other public comments? Okay, seeing none, it is 7:50. We're going to take a break until that clock, well, it's 5 minutes off about. We'll take a 10-minute break, so 8 o'clock by that clock. Thank you. Okay, we're going to bring the meeting back to order. I appreciate your all's patience as we took that break a little bit longer than expected. It gave, I think, our applicant and staff a little extra time to go through some concerns. Why don't we, since we ended on public comment, why don't we go through council discussion on some of the things that maybe we would like to see, or if you guys have questions that came up from that. Would anyone like to start?
Go ahead.
I'll start. Really, the only thing that came to mind as far as a concession, there's some more other things that are coming, but the trail along Ridge, the residents in the area were looking, what y'all discussed was a greenway type trail? Oh, multi-use path.
And multi-use path, okay.
That's different. Let me think about it.
Okay. Okay, were there other things that came up in the public comment you guys would like to review?
The, I guess what's maybe been at the forefront of discussion is the building height. I can kind of envision where that could possibly be a little problematic for residents. So, I have no idea of how that could be tackled. Architecture is not my thing, so.
Maybe clarification?
Yeah, if we can, certainly. I know Mr. Kuntz said that presently everything's at a 53-foot level, but I don't know, maybe that, I don't know. For the future construction, maybe instead of 55, something maybe even lower than 53, I'm thinking.
I was actually thinking, and I don't know how you all or the applicant or staff is going to feel about it, but if there were just a maximum height. So, and again, it's going to be the issue of clarifying how it's measured, but if we have 55 to the eave, obviously we don't want a pitched roof that's 30 feet tall. And just like creating some sort of guideline on what a total maximum would be. And something set in stone on like how far the tall buildings can be from the roads. So like they're more central.
And along those lines too, again, it's your all's application, so you're hearing all this, if you're amenable to do it. The building height, and I still have I'm trying to struggle hearing about the building height and knowing that section E, not only one, is closest kind of to the neighborhood of that we're speaking about trying to protect. And two, it's sloped. I know some of the other part is, but there's pretty good slope through the Shibui area. I would be wondering if you'd be amenable to maybe defaulting to our UDO definition of height, which is from top of the building to the base, just so we know that nothing in that section E could get caught up in I hate to say loophole, but the thing where you could have a perceived much taller building based on how you define height and based on the slope. I think if we went back to because your definition was a little bit different than the UDO. The UDO is going to include the roof and measure. It just would give some assurance that nothing in section E would creep really any taller than that 55 feet.
And those are the perimeter buildings, right?
E's just the one
Okay,
near
E.
all the neighboring houses, most of them. I know Ridge has some houses too, but E was the most impactful section there. Also, did y'all intend for those setbacks to be all the way around? They did kind of stop per the little map, as somebody mentioned, but would that be effective everywhere?
We intend that to be around section E. I'm sorry. It was the intent that those would stop around the Delaware, on the E properties, that the Shibui properties, that those would stop the way they're shown. those setbacks would stop, and that there would continue to be maintained a setback around the rest that was more consistent with the FRR, the current FRR. zoning.
What is the current setback in the FRR on Ridge?
There isn't one, right?
Yeah, the current
Well,
This has been one of our issues over the years, is right now the FRR zoning says the setback is the same as the adjacent zoning. So it's different all the way around it, and it's actually, and then the properties adjacent to it that are also zoned FRR are a real conundrum. So that's been a head scratcher for a long time.
I think in general, it's been 20 feet, and I think that's what we talked about I think we said 20 feet in our application, I believe.
Do you have any idea, Bob, how big the right-of-way is on Ridge approximately?
We had a 20-foot building setback on Ridge.
Do you know how much the right-of-way is from the edge of the pavement to the property line?
I do not know that exactly.
And I guess a question to the Pinnock folks, the fence that's located on Ridge, the aluminum fence, that is the boundary line, or fairly close?
That's close to located on our property line.
Okay, so I'm getting back to my original question on the sidewalk, but I'll wait till everybody else has an opportunity before I get back.
And just to clarify for me, if that's where the 20 feet would start.
Yeah.
For your setback from your property line.
Correct.
And so the right-of-way affords a little bit extra setback, even though technically it's not, but perception-wise it is.
It does,
Okay.
yes.
Is there any planted buffer there? Like, I mean, I think one of Joel's photos just you can see the building so clearly. And I know it's still under construction, but at some point, is there going to be plants put in there?
That's not part of it right now.
Okay.
That isn't part of the request.
Okay.
Or the additional information. It's more or less following the current FRR and what's permitted there now.
Okay. So am I hearing from my council that you all would like a setback on Ridge?
They actually do propose a setback on Ridge. It's just not the same in E, and it's 20 feet.
Okay. Would you guys like it to be the same?
Yeah, I'm fine with it, but I'll go with whatever everybody wants.
We had talked about that a little bit. We're not sure if the building that's being constructed right now is conforming or non-conforming with the 20 feet. So we're not exactly sure how far that building is back. So we don't want to create a situation there, but we think it's back 20 feet, but we're not sure how much further back it is.
Okay. So staff, can we?
Just so the council knows,
Yeah.
they can create, let's say they have a current building that is at 25 feet, and the council would like it to be more than that. They can consent to creating the nonconformity issue is not a 382 issue, et cetera. Like, they can consent to a different setback, and whereas one building's under construction today, therefore may be nonconforming with that, future buildings would not be. So creating a nonconformity out of an existing building under construction would not be the end of the world.
Let's say down the road, though, if there's a redevelopment of that parcel, it would have to be brought into conformance if something happened to that building.
The other option is to sawtooth that edge so that that building has a 20-foot setback in the zoning.
Okay.
Phase A, it's very easy to identify.
It is, right? Yeah, it is Phase A. I think, we did discuss the possibility, and if we went to a 30-foot setback across the front there for the buildings across the front, wanted to see if that would be acceptable. We extend it by 10 feet.
This is along Ridge.
Inclusive or exclusive of A in the current building?
Exclusive of A, because we don't know exactly where that building is right this second.
Okay, so I have a 30-foot setback along Ridge except for in parcel A.
So it would be B and D sections, yeah.
Okay. A question for staff. As far as phasing goes, does one phase have to be completed before the other phase starts, or can they all be happening at the same time?
Non-sequential phasing is the norm in Southern Pines right now. So the phasing is laid out merely so that it's clear that when a subsequent development approval comes in, it's part of this phase. But right now, the norm is that it can be stipulated that they have to be sequential for whatever reason. But the norm would be they could bring in D before B or C before D, that type of thing.
Okay.
The other issue with phasing is requirements for road construction.
Sure, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Utility construction can also come into play with that.
Yeah, I think that was the discussion with staff, was that the utilities in this development are the most important part of the phasing, making sure that each building is developed with the appropriate utilities and doesn't impact the other buildings that are currently in use. So that was James' biggest concern in the application.
Okay.
I can go back on the sidewalk.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was going back to my original questions, and it's more of an, how do you feel council, how do you feel, Mr. Manager, about either a greenway trail there, which doesn't exactly make sense, because there's not a greenway trail on the other end, on Ridge, or a all-weather, not necessarily multimodal, because we don't have that downtown either there. It appears from Google Images that, I know the town installing sidewalks in the last several years has meandered through trees. It appears that can possibly be done here. It also appears that there would be some trees that have to come out, especially kind of right in the middle. Well, I mean, that looks less than what I even was looking at. I mean, some of those trees have been.
One section where there's quite a slope there, and there are some trees there. The rest of it's relatively flat.
Yeah, it is.
That one section is really pretty steep.
Go
You
back.
can see it right there. You can
Yeah,
see it where
go
the
back
fence
towards
goes.
Delaware. See, right there is a perfect, keep on going. Oh, I wasn't even on that block. I was on the next block down to Delaware. That's where all the trees are.
There are a lot of trees in there.
That's Bishop. Is that still Phoenix? Is that Bishop?
Yeah, that wasn't Delaware we just passed. No, it wasn't. Delaware's the next one. So right there is the kind of the thick of it, but it looks like there's, also this area on Ridge has a greater, assuming that's the boundary line, the front boundary, is a greater right-of-way. So that's actually, how many blocks is it? 2 blocks?
3. Well,
3
yeah, it's 2
blocks.
blocks. 2 blocks.
Anyway, I would want you to consider possibly doing them, not necessarily multimodal and probably not greenway, because the staff would the town have to maintain that?
It's in the right of way.
We've got examples of both.
Really?
Yes. Now, if it's ultimately built in the right of way, and we're asking that they maintain it, there will obviously have to be agreements and easements that they've granted for that.
If they put a sidewalk, and this is probably, I may just have to go Google Maps and look, does it connect or is it disconnected on each end? If you,
There's nothing to it.
No, because Bishop's Ridge is on one end and Weymouth is on the other, and there's no sidewalk at either right now.
okay,
There is I think it's on Connecticut, there would be sidewalk. So Connecticut, there's sidewalk coming back toward town.
Yep, but not on the Weymouth side.
But not on the way up, yes.
But I mean, there are trails.
Yes.
And I feel like trails all through Weymouth are trails where it's at least walkable and gets people off the road. I know it's not a perfect solution, but I feel like that would be better than nothing.
a sidewalk.
No, like a trail, like, it didn't have to be a sidewalk. Just, I know,
Yeah.
just like what Weymouth has, just walking trail. Or along,
Sort of like a greenway trail, really.
yeah, like along South.
Is that
Mill.
something that you guys would consider along Ridge, Greenway Trail?
Permitting it within the right of way? I think so. As far as constructing it,
Yeah, constructing it.
I'm not sure.
It's permitted for the
Yeah, it's permitted, yeah.
but it's not.
Well, so if this were,
Yeah.
if it were a neighborhood that we're going in, we would expect sidewalks to go in.
It would be required.
It would be required. But I don't want to see you take out all the trees either.
Yeah, and the challenge for us is we have no idea what it would cost. And our residents are the only source of our revenue, and so that it would be on their backs in order to have to pay for it. I'd like to pass the CDP tonight. We'd be happy to take a look at it, but that's not something I would want to say that we would pay for at this point, because I have no idea.
I know a greenway trail would be significantly less than a multimodal path or a sidewalk. We probably have some linear foot estimations times 800 feet, which is about what the length is there, I would guess, 2 blocks. If it's 2 blocks, I think a block's at 400 feet.
The third block would be up Delaware.
Generally,
10 feet?
Yeah, generally it's 10 feet, with limited sections that can go down and avoid trees and wind around.
So it would be like, okay.
Yeah, I think that's
It's
part of
kind
the
of a
challenge
mess.
because it's a wide trail and going through a couple of those areas where there's significant grade. I mean, there's going to be a lot of grading that has to go on, maybe some retaining walls. I mean, it starts to become an unknown number all the way down through there, a really large unknown number going down through.
I mean, that's a really big tree in that picture right there.
I'm hearing that buffering and distance is very valued, and if that trail is going to cause some of those trees to come out, I'd probably rather have trees, because that's all I'm hearing is buffering and as much of that as we can do, even though it'd be nice.
Yeah, I was just kind of being responsive to the concerns. I feel like I heard that y'all were more concerned about having a walking trail than if a few trees came out, but I don't.
I don't mean to cut you off, Councilman Goodman. Yeah, even the planning board's recommendation was a trail. So, can y'all go back to that? Mr. Maddox? I remember you saying, and I'm sorry, you were talking about a walking trail, am I right? When you said the planning board's recommendation?
Specifically, a multi-use path along Ridge Street, yes. That was the recommendation to allow a provision. I believe that their intention from being at the meeting was for you all to really look into that as a possibility, more so than specific guidance on what that would actually look like.
See, multi-use, what I would assume is synonymous with multimodal, and that would be a expectation greater than we would expect of anyone anywhere.
Generally, the multi-use paths have been located historically, at least, like along Morganton Road. We've got
Yes.
the Knoll Road path coming up. This would typically be more of a sidewalk and/or greenway trail type of scenario, because the traffic counts on Ridge Street are not what you get on some of those other locations where there's a separate multimodal path.
Right. That's true. That's actually a valid point, that there's probably not that much traffic there anyway, but. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna move on.
Mr. Pate, did you feel like your height,
I was just going to ask Bob, would y'all be willing to go to the UDO definition for section E so that we know top of the roof is the measuring point for anything height-wise on that section?
Based on what we've talked about, and we ran some calculations and trying to figure out sort of what that height would be comfortable with, go back to the definition of not the average grade or any of those things, but go to 60 feet in height. We think that would give us enough to get the pitched roof and basically say nothing goes over 60 feet.
okay, so it's a maximum?
With the maximum height based on the UDO standard of measuring height to the top of the roof. So we think with some pushing down of the eaves and some other things that architecturally that could work and be able to work with that 4-story height.
Does that sound better? Okay. The Yelp alternative, I know that Yelp will still be required, but if we can put that in writing, that you will have an alternative to Yelp so that the neighbors are not having to hear the sirens every time someone enters the gate, would be great.
So what I was told when I talked to Ken Skipper, he said, any unmanned gate will have Yelp, no matter what. It won't go away. He said, if there's other alternatives, we'll look at them. So there's the two that we can find right now that work with our gates is this radio frequency, and Evidently, you get there, turn it circuit frequency, hit it, the gate would open, or almost like a button like you have in your car. And he said, that's probably not feasible, number of fire trucks, police officers, ambulances, whatever.
Okay.
So we're looking at that, but he did say the Yelp stays. It will not go away, because he said, we're blowing our whistle at every intersection as we get there anyway, so.
So understanding that the Yelp is going to be required anyway, I would like the requirement, a commitment that you have like the radio frequency or whatever is determined with the fire department is the alternate.
Yeah, I think if the fire marshal would approve an alternate, then yes, I think Phoenix would commit
Okay.
to putting it in and
Is staff
installing it.
comfortable with that?
I think what you're asking for is both, Yelp
Well,
and
Yelp
an
is going to
RF.
have to be required,
Right,
yes.
so it would be,
So
but,
whatever fire marshal also says is okay.
Right.
That you all are committing to do that, and also have the Yelp so that if that doesn't work.
Yeah.
The backup is the
Yeah.
backup.
Okay. Does staff feel comfortable with that language?
it's in the narrative, isn't it? Or is it just in the discussion?
I don't remember seeing it in the narrative.
But not their narrative.
The issue's going to be getting.
The radio option that's being explored, if the fire marshal will approve that, then yes.
It's easy.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kuntz, what did you say?
Oh, I was saying if the fire marshal will approve the radio, then absolutely, they would
Okay.
be happy to install.
Mr. Parsons, do you see any issue there?
The fire marshal's still making the call on it, no issues from staff there.
The fire chief see any issues there? Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you. And I think it sounds like this council would like to maintain the architectural design approval process, especially with the 25%, like the reduction in brick. So it's already a deviation.
I have a question about that, though,
Yeah,
if
go
I
for
could.
it.
As part of approval of this CDP, they have an architectural standard as a part of this zoning, correct? So the discussion of, or the debate of 80% versus 25% brick is blocked in here? Yes. So you're just going to be reviewing architectural standards that are outlined here?
Yeah, the way the CDP is
Not
written.
the UDO.
That's correct. The way the CDP is presently written is that you're reviewing the architectural standards that are in the UDO, the CDP, or the prevailing architecture on campus. And so we would do an administrative review of those standards, either the UDO or if modified by the CDP,
Right.
for under 10,000 square feet. So yes, we would look to make sure it was 25% brick. If the 25% brick is the problem, then that should be addressed right here.
No, I'm fine, I just was.
Yeah. I think the 25% brick thing that's not my problem. I think my concern is whether it's this council or the council 15 years from now, when a building goes up, we're going to be held responsible. Someone's going to come to us and say, I don't like it. And at that point, whoever's sitting up here feels like they had no input. And so I don't want to stick a future council with something that we're deciding today.
If it was
Or at least
under
give them
10,000
in-
square feet and it met the standards.
Their own
Now, if it
standard?
was under 10,000 square feet and it didn't meet the standards in the CDP and the UDO, it would have to come to town
Yeah.
council. So,
But even if it's over, it's the bigger buildings that I'm concerned about. And even if they do meet these standards, I think you can meet standards and still have an ugly building versus have a nice building. And I don't think that you guys are going to put ugly buildings in. I absolutely would not think that. I just think that I know when buildings go in, people call me and say it's ugly, or I don't like it, or why would you approve that? I would like for them, the people sitting up here, to at least have input.
Be able to say you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, they can't blame us, they can blame themselves.
I think that will be agreeable
Okay.
to the applicant.
All right, were there other specific things that you guys wanted to include?
Sorry, I just was trying to get clarity on what I was asking about before.
And the height?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Planning Director Grieve, if you could help me make sure we're on the same page in what we're hearing and understanding. If I heard the applicant say that they would go to UDO standard, which is, explain the difference between that versus what they had initially written.
We're talking building height?
Yes.
Okay, yep, we did a screenshot real quick of the side-by-side of the building heights. So the left side is the current zoning in Southern Pines to define building height. Height of the building, vertical distance measured from the mean elevation at the finished grade at the front of the building to the highest point of the building. They're proposing on the right to be measured from the front of the building to the eave of the building at the average grade of the building. Sloped roofs will not be included in the calculation of building height. So if they had a gable roof or a hip roof, none of that height would be included. We're not in Switzerland, so the pitch, it's not going to be 30, 40 feet for that pitch, but it's going to be, it could be in the ballpark of 10 or 15 extra feet for a normal gable or hip roof around here. It's probably going to be gable for these structures, I'm assuming. But
they've already updated this to 60 feet maximum.
well, they've thrown that out there as a scenario, and it's up to town council what you're comfortable with when it comes to building height. Couple ideas are, for example, getting back to this image here. If you say certain building height in E, it doesn't include ridge. Another way of doing it, what I've heard you say, Bill, is that within the interior of Phoenix, you're just far less concerned about the building height. It's more along the perimeter is where, just because of that matching of things across the
Yes,
street.
correct.
Another thing you could do is you could say buildings within a certain distance from the property line, like that are considered around the perimeter have to meet a certain building height. Rather than saying, because if you just say, if it's around the perimeter, we're going to be arguing some point about whether or not a building going up is close enough to the perimeter to qualify this, and they're going to argue that's not the perimeter, that one over there is the perimeter. So some definition of perimeter, or it does work to say E, that works because it's defined in that phasing plan. But again, a distance from the property line if you're concerned about ridge as well, any buildings within that distance. And if you just scale it off, you're talking, if you want the shorter building height for perimeter, 150 to 200 feet back from the property line is going to be, if you go back to this right here and scale it out, if this blue line is 40 feet, that's about 80 right there, so it'd be about right in here. That'd be in the ballpark of 160 to 200 feet. You could go 150, you go 100, something like that. Now, again, that's not a 100-foot buffer. That's not a 100-foot vegetated setback you have to plant. I'm just saying that would be another way to define what you're considering about buildings within close enough to the perimeter. And after that, everything inside, you could go to a higher building height because it's not as much.
Just an E? Or what?
Well, whatever, however you guys want to handle that. I'm throwing it out there. as
So
another
in
alternative.
A, those buildings are already being built, right?
We can't really.
Yeah.
I mean, just for our discussion, like, from what I'm hearing, I would think that they would, or that the neighborhood would prefer, if we're going to limit height in any area, like BJ said, within 100, if any building within 100 feet of the line versus just E, because then.
The problem with going with just E is now you're capturing these buildings right in here, if you
Yeah.
can see my cursor. And I don't think you care, from what I've heard, you don't care as much about the height of those buildings. So to say all of E is actually more limiting than if you just say around. And if you only care about the perimeter adjacent to Delaware, that's an option, if whatever.
Yeah, so the picture, the image that Joel shared was a lower one, closer to similar houses, and then as you cross the road in, for example, E, that could be taller. And you don't know how far, I think 100 feet is probably the right number.
So then how would you word it?
We would we either, if we say 100, again, they have to be amenable to it, to understand what they're trying to do. If we set that 100 feet, I mean, didn't we say no building greater than 3 stories with 100 feet? Or would we set a number that just says like, I don't know, a 50?
Well, if you said within that 100 feet, you meet one option would be if you were within 100 feet, you meet the UDO definition of building height. That would bring it down because now it's to the top of the building. Reducing it they're at 4 stories right now, reducing it to 3 stories would be another way to do it within the 100 feet. You're just trying to bring that building height down. Another way to do it would be to let them have their building height, but increase the buffer. Right now it's at 40 feet. If you pushed it back and still just let it be one definition of building height in Phoenix, that'd be another option because you're just getting further and further back from the property line, which is kind of your point. Really, it's a sliding scale of being further away from the property line and the building being tall, or closer to the property line and the building being shorter. So that's the issue.
I like pushing it back more.
And yes, putting a height to the building in feet with a good definition of what you're measuring is better than stories, because stories always winds up becoming an issue later of what counts as a story, or, how do you define it?
I kind of like the suggestion of the 60 feet max, yeah. I'm thinking, I guess, with limiting the stories, you're going to limit the number of dwelling units, am I correct? So, yeah, and I'm not in favor of that at all.
Was that version, if I may real quick, was that they had said, go with the UDO definition, but go to 60 feet?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, can you pull that back up? The two definitions?
Yep.
Yeah. Basically, I think it would.
Increase the buffer.
That we would use this definition, but change this to a building height of 60 feet. But measured by the
So if I may, what you do is delete the highlighted on the right. It would just say the building height of up to 60 feet is permitted, and the height would be just defined under the UDO.
Under the UDO, yes.
We could administer that if that pleases the council.
That would be the simplest, easiest for everybody to understand, from our perspective. We're dealing with.
I would like, if we, just again, to protect that perimeter, increase that buffer if we could, just so that we know that a building is going to be as protected as it can on the edge. Did y'all, I don't know, like, what was this now at the 30 and or 40?
30 and/or 40.
Right now, it's 30-foot setback for buildings at 35 feet and under. It's a 20-foot landscape buffer, and it's a 40-foot setback for buildings over 35 feet.
And
So remember, it's built, right now, the landscape buffer is 20 feet.
What number y'all thinking?
landscape buffer is not a requirement of the multifamily. It was RM1.
Oh, adjacent to, like, what the zoning is adjacent to? Can check that real quick. Thank you.
Well, I guess from your, again, this is conceptual, so that's not, what's on the screen isn't real. From that picture, even that thing at the corner of Delaware and the Bishop's Ridge, that building is well interior from the bright blue line. So that would show me that, you could easily set the setback bigger and protect what appears in there. Have you done enough sort of site plan square footage enough to know that if we increased it a little more to protect that edge, would it give you flexibility to do what you're trying to do?
We haven't gotten that far in the plan. We're not 100% sure at this point, but yeah.
From a business model perspective, if we keep pushing it back, our density becomes so small that it almost becomes challenging for us to build. Because if we can't have enough density in the campus, then it's hard to make the business case work. And so, taking a hard look at the 40-foot buffer that we've come back with after going from, I think we went from 20 to 30, and that was acceptable, and then it wasn't acceptable, not from you guys, but from other folks. Now we've put in the 30-foot with the 40-foot extra for higher buildings. That's the business component just becomes more challenging because we have less density.
If I may, just a point of clarification. Right now, according to the CDP, the way it's drawn that we're looking at is that the buffer is only 20 feet. It's the building setback that goes to 40, and just a matter of clarity.
Right.
And the building setback is 30 feet if it's a shorter building, 40 feet if it's a taller building.
And that's from the property line, like from the right of way or whatever, right? Okay, thank you.
RM1 zoning, it's a 30-foot setback around that entire property under the current zoning of RM1.
It's on top of each other. Sorry, I'm going through my notes. It looks like they're talking. Okay. I think I'd.
Apparently, I get to participate again. I'm interested in a three-story limit. I'm interested in the maintaining the architectural design. I'm interested in larger buffers that agreed to. I'm interested in stormwater plans being continuous, not just appropriate for the building. And I obviously have lots of reservations and need to have a chance to understand what's gone wrong. I understand the problems with the Greenway path, although I do acknowledge how lovely it would be to have a Greenway path that led into Weymouth and connected more Greenway. I think that's something that previous councils have made very important, and I'd like to honor that. I'm interested in going ahead and saying yes to a boundary 6-foot wall behind Delaware. I'm interested in a limitation on how dense E can be, with the understanding that some of that planning has already, some of the building has already been done, which addresses my concern about the additional 19% with 77% of the building, that Mr. Pate also shared that concern. I like the overall height because we don't play games that were played earlier with the Historic District Committee in regard to the proposed hotel, and they were going to turn the hotel around and build it the opposite direction in order to go from the, quote, front of the building. I'm interested in the setbacks from both Ridge and Delaware. And again, measure to the top, not the eave. I think it just gets there are too many things that could go wrong, and it's not clear, and it ties the hands of folks in the future who are on the council. Plantings on Ridge would be amazing. And I think that everybody's agreed to garages facing the interior. I feel like that's really important. And I would rather stick to the 55-foot level as far as height goes. I mean, we are in charge. We are the ones who make the decision. That's our UDO. I'm interested in abiding by our UDO. So when they throw out 60, it's just like last meeting, they threw out 70. And I'm also interested in talking to the fire chief about whether or not 60-foot means a new fire truck ladder. I mean, do we have to now buy a new fire truck, which fire trucks are running $1.5 million? Thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Maddox, I think you had something you wanted to say? No, okay. Mr. Coons?
Yes, in order to find some balance here.
Sure.
If we increased the setback along the Delaware Avenue properties and along those parcels to 45 feet, but agreed to a 30-foot planted buffer, which would be the entire setback, if we agreed to increase the landscaping there with trees, and based on the standards of the Southern Pines ordinance, there'd be a lot of trees through there and a lot of trees in that area.
So 30-foot planted, 45 setback.
45 setback. Yeah, for anything over 35 feet, yeah.
Okay.
If it's 35 feet or less, it would still be 30 feet. And that's the setback is along Delaware? Along the properties, basically where our 40-foot setback is.
45. Then it's back to 20 and 30 probably. Oh, I bet one, Fred. And just to clarify, so when the building is below 35 feet, it's still going to be the 20-foot buff, 20 and 30, 20-foot planted, 30-foot setback.
That's correct.
Okay,
yeah.
just making sure we had the right numbers.
But if there's a building taller than 35 feet, that it would have a 30-foot planted buffer.
Okay. That makes me comfortable. Okay. I think so too. What about trail? You. So first, you are out of order, but I wasn't going to say it. Second, so we've gone back to definition per the UDO, which is total height. Correct. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Yep. I still have a little bit of concern over phasing because I just don't want to see all the work happen at once. I know you all don't want to do that. You all have residents. Is there some way to, I don't know.
So it doesn't all happen at once?
I mean, something so that the neighbors are not, they're not seeing it all turn down and all being built at once. Well, yes. Okay. Let me grab a microphone. Yeah.
Do you want to go to that screen?
Currently,
Do you want the phasing screen? With the colors?
well, I mean, this will give you an idea. So that is the projected new healthcare building. Currently, the healthcare building is here, and that's called the terrace. That could not be taken down until a new healthcare building was built. And so it would be impossible for us to do it all at once, just for the simple fact that we have to have somewhere for the folks that are in skilled care, assisted living to go before we took down that building.
Okay.
So it would have to happen in phases.
Okay.
I have another question for you. When you have the building that is for the memory care unit, does that count as one unit that currently houses about 12 people, or does that count as 12 units?
Any licensed bed would count as one unit.
So that would be 12 units in your current memory care.
Currently, there's 10 in our memory support cottage, and that would count as 10 units.
All right, council, are there things that you feel like?
I know we talked about the trail, but I do respect the fact that the planning department recommended it. And I know that, I'm sorry, planning board recommended it. And I know that it's not something that you can kind of even estimate the cost because you don't know what it would entail. I'm sorry.
Actually, in their discussion, in the discussion that we had during that meeting, it was about whether or not Phoenix would allow it in front of their area. It wasn't necessarily that they would pay for it or that they would, it was more about, would it be amenable to put a trail in front of it?
Phoenix property?
To allow it, no, to allow it in the right of way, basically.
Oh.
And
Okay.
Trail would be allowed in the right-of-way with or without their consent.
Right, to allow it, yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to call another brief recess. It looks like our planning staff is working through some language. And it'll give council another minute to look through our notes and see if there's other things that need to be discussed.
It is actually one, so it is actually 3 blocks.
8 minutes according to that clock, so 9 o'clock we'll come back.
There's access back here.
So you were the Parker Five? Yeah. The entire government policy. Just say. A long time ago, I'm trying to talk my daughter's in law school right now. I'm trying to talk her into different lanes. She went over environmental. She wants to do like wildlife and stuff like that, but I'm like, I don't like land use. First, land use pays better. Exactly. That's what I told her. People that think they want to be in the environmental law don't understand that I try to go for the polluters. Right, exactly. That's what understands. There are 500 jobs for environmental users. There are 15 jobs represented by white folks. I had another attorney, I told him that she wanted to do environmental. He said, okay, does she want to protect the babysitter or keep the babysitter? Right. She wants to protect them, she's going to have a long road. She wants to beat them. Go back to your tax. Raise your taxes. They need both. Horribly. So I imagine yes, they did. I've worked with a couple of those guys that represent. We worked with we had to have an environmental attorney on projects I was working on with the land use. I represented Duke Energy. He drove around. Really nice car. They just as long as it meets the standard, so it's as written. So we started with 15. I said the exterior.
I think it's because my son's been looking at so much Pokemon stuff on my phone. My phone is like anything collectibles, it throws at me all the time.
I'm just waiting on staff. So as soon as I get a thumbs up from them, I'll bring it back. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I'm just waiting on staff to get everything cleared up to make sure that we know we have the right language and can continue discussion. I'm going to call us back to order. It looks like staff is ready. All right. Staff, if you would like to run through a summary of the things we've talked about in a way that we can kind of give you head nods at least on what we're working through, or go through our notes and see what's been addressed, I think that would be great.
The summary version, which is already drafted into a motion, but I've retained the issue of watershed allocation, as I discussed briefly in my presentation earlier, that will have to be during PDP phase for Phase E. For the changes out of tonight, I have the Yelp gate issue. I have building height being 60 feet in the entire CDP. I have, and defined as the same within the UDO as amended. And then we have increased the building setback adjacent to Delaware Avenue, so we said on the east side, to 30 feet with a 20-foot planted buffer for buildings less than 35 feet in height, equal to or lesser than 35 feet in height. Buildings in excess of 35 feet in height will have a 45-foot setback with a 20-foot planted buffer.
I think it was 30.
30-foot buffer. Do I need to do that one more time, a little bit easier? All right. And then on Exhibit 5, so this is the area adjacent to Ridge Street, a 30-foot building setback, exclusive of Phase A. So we said Phase B and D.
And so we did visit about that with the applicant, that we're on the same page. And then the only issue remaining that we didn't hear from the council any guidance on was the issue of the trail yet, and we can still draft that or whatever comes up about the trail.
I don't think the trail is a priority. I think lack of existing connection at the entrance or at the side of Weymouth or even sidewalks on either end, it sounds like council's okay without a trail. All right.
If once discussion is done, we do have that crafted as a motion. I can read all that in detail into the record, and then someone can say so moved, or we can continue to modify it as you keep going. So it's an option either way.
Okay, so just on the head nod, are you guys okay moving forward? Okay, all right. I think if you'll put it into the form of a motion, then we will have somebody speak.
How about the maintaining architectural design by the council? Is that part of your motion?
It's something that I had asked for, and it sounded like a majority of council did not care about it.
I want to clarify that. So right now, the way it would be, they have written their architectural standard as a part of this CDP. As the code, as the UDO reads, and for buildings less than 10,000 square feet, it would be a staff approval.
If it complies, it would be an administrative review.
If it complies with the standards as they've written in their CDP. I'm comfortable with staff approving it. I'm actually probably more comfortable with staff looking at the language of the CDP and seeing that any building really complies with the CDP.
Right now, the way the CDP is written is that it sets those new standards. If a building in Phoenix meets the standards, no matter the size, staff can review it. That's the way it reads in the CDP right now. If it doesn't meet those standards, small or big, it has to come to town council.
And historically, we've had that issue with the buildings that are right there at the gate. And we did a lot of changing on the architectural review. Just want to remind people of that.
Well, Let me ask this about, relative to that question. There was no CDP for those buildings, right? Or there was? Or it was a part of this?
Those buildings defaulted to the UDO rate requirement, chapter, section 4.10.
Right.
And then the issue was that those standards, the current standards in 4.10.4 are really different than the prevailing architecture on the Peanut campus.
Right.
So yes, they
Right.
did not comply, so they brought them to town council.
So, but the issue was not that they had a hard time complying with their own standard in their zoning category, because there was no standard for them. Okay, that's what I thought. I'm fine with staff having that. I think that,
Council to retain
Okay.
control over that. That's pretty important, I think. There's been a historical evidence that that's something about which we need to be aware.
Bill?
I mean, I see both sides. I mean, that's, either way is not a deal breaker for me. I guess here's the only thing that I think of is there any remedy for whether you review it or re-review it, perfectly compliant, but just an ugly building? For us to be like, it's in compliance, but it doesn't look very good. Go back and fix this or that. Is there any?
No.
Okay.
that's going to be a quick answer.
All right, Ms. Gray?
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Goodman. I see no reason why council should need to do the architectural review if town staff is taking care of that. And it has to come back to us anyway if there's a major problem, so.
The staff is technical and competent enough, I think, to carry out the mission of the CDP themselves.
Why don't we go ahead and if you'll read everything you did in the form of a motion, and we'll see if it goes, and then if not, we'll continue discussion.
I move to approve PD 0425 with a concurrent amendment to the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, reclassifying a portion of the site from horse country to suburban settlement, subject to the following condition of approval: that the conceptual development plan shall be amended as follows, and that a final revised copy shall be submitted to the planning department prior to the submittal of any preliminary development plan application. A, prior to PDP approval for any development in Phase E, the applicant must either demonstrate that impervious surface does not exceed the pre-1993 amount or obtain watershed allocation. A final revised copy of the CDP shall be submitted to the planning department prior to the submission of any PDP application. B, install a fire marshal approved gate opener for use by the Town of Southern Pines Emergency Services in addition to Yelp. C, within the entire CDP, the height of a building shall be defined the same as within the UDO. Buildings shall be a maximum of 60 feet in height. D, on Exhibit 4 on the east side, for buildings equal to or lesser than 35 feet in height, the building setback is 30 feet with a 20-foot planted buffer. For buildings greater than 35 feet in height, the building setback is 45 feet with a 30-foot planted buffer. And E, on Exhibit 5, a 30-foot building setback shall be required along Ridge Street in phases B and D.
And is on the gate issue, do we need to clarify fire marshal approved in case the fire marshal does not? Do we have to have language in there?
He said fire marshal.
Okay, you did. I just missed it. Okay, thanks.
And a little more clear, it was fire marshal approved, non-audible,
Well, in addition to Yelp.
Right.
But he didn't say
okay?
non-audible.
Because, I mean, it could be just another Yelp,
Right, yeah.
right? So it's,
Non-audible, just gate opener.
okay. I think the whole point of it was that it wasn't, they didn't have to chirp their alarm. So just, if you don't mind, we can add non-audible to it.
All right. Council, is there someone who will make that motion?
So
Or is there
moved.
additional discussion? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you guys so much. I know that that was a long discussion. To the applicant, I really appreciate the concessions that you made, and I think that it will be an improved project for it. Okay, our last item on the agenda is our closed session, so I'm just going to ask
Dedication?
everyone. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the dedication. Okay. We have our action item, the offer of dedication for a portion of South Carlisle Street. Do we have staff, South Carlisle dedication? Anything to say? Thank you, guys.
Just that right there.
Oh, on that road, yeah.
It's kind of pretty back there.
I thought you read that well.
Thank you.
Yeah, well written,
It
well
was,
read.
well, I mean, your pronunciation was, well,
Making us look bad.
it's magnificent. It's better than mine. Oh, I take it all back.
It's funny. It's funny he started with the Flathead County thing because I've frequently said I'm from Pitt County Planning Department, and at my last job, I had a lot of complaints that I didn't use a Southern enough accent to make people feel comfortable. So sometimes I slip in and out of it.
Right.
So, all right, here we have
I think that's great.
Carlisle. If you see in the outline in red, that's the area proposed for dedication to the town. The town does already maintain jurisdiction over the remainder of Carlisle. Next page, please. Or actually, I've got the thing still, yep. Oop. And that's a recent drone image by our own planning director. The portion you see on screen right in that heavily vegetated area. Thank you, BJ. Short and sweet. Any questions for staff?
No. No, is there a motion?
I will move to approve the resolution accepting the offer of dedication, RD-2-25, for the acceptance of a portion of South Carlisle Street.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, now we are moving on to our last item, which is the closed session. I'm just going to ask anyone else who's here to depart. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Please make a formal motion with that general statute number that's on your agenda.
I
there.
will make, you can make it. I'll make a motion that we enter closed session under North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A6 to discuss the performance reviews for town manager and town attorney.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. As soon as everyone's out, we will start our closed session.
I feel like I'm supposed to eat.
There already was lunch at the church, and is that okay? Sandwiches.
There's sandwiches back there. Have they been sitting out all night?
Okay, no, that's all right.
There's chips and cookies.
No, I'm supposed to